Hello everyone, wishing all of you is safe and healthy wherever you are. Welcome to Lesson Learning GPS Scholar application in wildlife conservation management. Thank you all for finding time and visiting this webinar. This webinar is organized by Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum and Sintas Indonesia. With our partners, there are Directorate General of Natural Resources and Ecosystem Conservation, Ministry of Environmental and Forestry, GEF UNDP Sumatran Tiger Project, Pakuan University, Restorasi Ecosystem Riau, Zoological Society of London Indonesia Program, San Diego Zoo Global, APP Sinarmas, and Copenhagen Zoo, Yayasan Arsari Joyo Hadikusumo. These webinars involve international and national practitioners who will share their experience to be learned in using GPS Scholar. We consider the use of GPS Scholar essential as part of wildlife conservation management, and this webinar series will be the first step of the development of a protocol GPS Scholar application in Indonesia. Well, that's me. My name is Adinda Putri from Sintas Indonesia, your MC for this webinar. Before we start, let me explain how you can talk to us during the webinar. Inside the room, you are facilitated with chat box, Q&A, and raise hand features to make sure you can interact with the speaker. We also facilitate you with interpretation feature both English to Bahasa and reverse to ensure you get better understanding. Organizer will provide an attendance form link chat box which you are required to fill. It is an important step to get the e-certificate. The link will be sent after all session done. Once again, link will be sent after all session done. During the webinar, you are not allowed to write any message containing sensitive issues such as ethnicity, religion, race, gender, and other intergroup relations. If we find anyone breaking this regulation, webinar operator will remove the offender from the room without warning. As I said before, we also facilitate you with interpretation feature. This is how to activate the feature of interpretation. Make sure your Zoom desktop or mobile version is updated. Once again, you must update your Zoom version. On your screen, select that icon and choose your preferred language. You can choose English or Bahasa. This is our keynote speaker that coming from Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Indonesia Institute of Science, Pakuan University, and Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum, Copenhagen Zoo, San Diego Zoo Global, and from Independent Research. Great. Let me explain our agenda. This webinar will be divided into two sessions, where each session will be led by a moderator, and we will have a question and answer session at the end to answer your question and short breaks. After that, we will have summary and closing discussion. And now, we would like to receive participant feedback via AHA Slides. So you can see a link that we share on chat box. So please, anyone see your chat box now? we are going to share link for direct you to AHA slides. Kindly to check a link that we share on chat box, or you can go to browser and type ahaslides.com/scholar or by scan barcode. Okay, or you can go to your browser and type ahaslides.com/scholar or check on chat box, we share link and just click it. Or you can scan this barcode to join. The question number 1, what do you know about live tracking and its technology? Very important for understanding animal movement and behavior, contributes to our understanding of species distribution and habitat use, and answer in bahasa, digunakan untuk memantau pergerakan satwa liar dengan menggunakan teknologi satelit atau VHF. Next, there are with us Mr. Ahmad Faisal, DVMM.Res. He is chairman of Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum. So, Mr. Faisal, are you with me now?
Yes, Dinda.
Okay, please give us the opening remarks. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm sorry about my video. It's having a bit of an issue. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam kebajikan. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Sejahtera to us all. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I hope everyone here is equally safe and healthy during this difficult time. Technology has never stopped evolving in pretty much everything in our lives, including in the wildlife conservation. Wildlife tracking and monitoring, for instance, is one of the efforts using the advance of technology applied to observe the movement of wild animals, including the endangered ones. In doing this, enable us to understand all sorts of data and information which can help us to better protect and manage it. Now, GPS Collar is one of the technology used in today's conservation work to provide this kind of information. In Indonesia, there were few cases of the use of GPS Collar in large mammals before, but unfortunately, not all had worked and provided results as expected, which is the very reason that leads us to this webinar. By having this webinar, we hope to obtain valuable inputs, lesson learned, and practical recommendations from academia, scientists, conservation practitioners, and government officials to enhance the GPS color applications practices for wild animals in Indonesia. In the future, we also aim to develop guidelines and protocols in GPS color application to assist government of Indonesian officials, researchers, and conservation practitioners in applying this technology in the field. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the committee and generous donors who sponsored this webinar, I would like to express warm welcome to all speakers. Pak Wiratno, Bu Indra from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Selamat datang, Pak, Bu. And Pak Gono from the Indonesian Institute of Science, Pak Doli from Pakuan University, and a special shout out, especially to our international speakers. We have Carl Trejo from the Copenhagen Zoo. We have Matthias Tobler from San Diego Zoo and Samia Tobler. I believe the timing of this webinar might be less ideal for some of you, but you make the time anyway. So thank you and really appreciate it. And last but not least, I welcome to all participants who are joining this webinar, which all of whom come from various backgrounds. We have academia, scientists, conservation practitioners, government officials, students, private sectors, and NGOs. I hope all of you will have a fantastic webinar and gain valuable knowledge along the way. I think that's all from me. Thank you. Dinda, over to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Faisal, for your opening remarks. And next, our today's moderator for first session is Ms. Fauzia M. Kusmarani. CS graduate from Master Program in Biology, Indonesia University, and now she is Executive Officer at Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum. Ms. Zia, can you hear me now?
Yes, Ms. Dinda, thank you very much.
Okay, so you can go ahead. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adinda. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today we are going to enter the first session of our discussion today. So before we begin, I would like to introduce myself one more time. My name is Fauzia Kusmarani and I'm with the Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum. I will be guiding the discussion session for today. So as we may have known, the use of GPS color as a conservation tool in Indonesia is not very new. However, it is still not common. In order to gain a better understanding of how it can be used in conservation management, today we are going to join three keynote speakers who will share their expertise and experiences regarding the policy and regulation of GPS color use in Indonesia, and then the scientific authorization of GPS color use, as well as the key issues and considerations before using GPS colors as a conservation tool. So our three keynote speakers for the first session would be first Mr. Insinyur Wiratno, the General Director of Natural Resources and Ecosystem Conservation of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And the second one is Professor Dr. Gono Semiadi from the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. And the third one would be Dr. Doli Priyatna from Pakuan University and the Advisory Board of Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum. So before we move on to the presentation, I would like to remind all participants one more time that you may put your questions in the Q&A box on the lower part of your screen. And all of the questions and answers would be addressed by the end of all presentations. So to begin with the first session, I would like to invite Mr. Insinyur Wiratno, the Director General of Natural Resource and Ecosystem Conservation. Mr. Wiratno has been working in conservation since 1988. And aside from working in conservation, he is also actively writing books, including Nahkoda Leadership dalam Organisasi Konservasi and Pembelajaran Resource-Based Management 2012 to 2013. Mr. Wiratno will represent the Indonesian government in explaining laws and regulations surrounding GPS color use, especially in Indonesia. Mr. Wiratno, sir, are you with us already?
Ya, thank you Mbak. Siapa namanya? Fauzia ya.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Yeah, good morning.
Good morning everybody. Thank you very much for everybody, Prof. Gono, the speakers, teman-teman saya, Pak Doli, Mas Darmawan. There are many from abroad ya, teman-teman. Thank you. First, I think it is very important to share the experiences using GPS Scholar. I myself monitor the GPS Scholar, for instance, and the movement of 3 group of elephant in Aceh, for instance, and also one group of elephant recently in the Tanggamus in Bukit Barisan National Park. Also, there is an effort to put the GPS collar for the tiger by Yayasan Asari. Asari. There are ongoing process of using GPS collar, and it is interesting because it is we can monitor their movement, also map, and most important thing is also giving the direct recommendation to the DG or to the park manager. Here I also forward the invitation to all my park manager, park director, or KSTA manager across these countries. Here you can see the Bukit head of Bukit 30 National Park that just now using the video trap, she got 3 new baby Sumatran tiger just now. Also we got can monitor the baby born of rhino in Ujung Kulon National Park through also through the video trap. According to the law, I think what is important here also, my staff Bu Indra, are you here joining this event? Bu Indra or Grace, my staff will participate. I think based on regulation, we don't have the what do you call it, the exact regulation or clear regulation on the GPS collar, and if it is necessary to prepare that regulation, I think it is not a difficult decision. Ada Pak Wilasan juga. There are many, there are already 260 participants. Amazing. I think what is important from this GPS collar application is when we want to learn what is the effective way to put the GPS, and what is the implication of the GPS application for monitor the movement and the habitat. And we can also very important because Horizon right now 27.14 million hectare of protected areas is surrounded by more than 6,000 villages. There are many conflict, yeah, wildlife human conflict due to habitat loss, habitat conversion, fragmentation, like in Rio situation. Yeah. So the in short that we want to learn or cross learning about the effectiveness of the Collar GPS Collar application, and I support all the effort of everyone, every NGOs or activists uh, who use this. In the case of bird, for instance, we got the Burungnesia application that what we call it the citizen science. Everybody can report when they know or they knew a bird and reporting to the center in the Burungnesia led by Swiss Vinasis in Malang, and it's already more than 1,000 report about the bird. And right now we are developing the Swiss and the teams developing the Atlas Burung Indonesia. That is the participation of community in conservation is very, very important, and we need that support. And but I think that is the remark from me as a DG, and hopefully there will be a new movement on the habitat mapping or potential wildlife human conflict, and when there is a project on smart patrol application in Loser, Kerinci, and Bukit Barisan, and the other several protected areas, it seems that this very relevant to for us to put the priority setting of the investment and so forth. I also interested in how much money we put or how effective this application for us, because we can also invest. This is uh, the next new financial planning, yeah, 2021. So this the result of this meeting, it will be very important. Hopefully there will be a, a conclusion and recommendation, yeah, concrete recommendation for us that we can use not only for the financial planning, but also for to move our staff to the sensitive area like right now in the case of Sumatra rhino. Thank you, Mbak Fauzia. I'm listening while I'm working also. Thank you. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Wiratno, sir. That was such an inspiring remark. We do agree that conservation is not the business of just a few people. It's not the responsibility of the ministry alone. In order to have an effective conservation program, we also have to involve the society, especially those who are living close to our protected areas. The support of our people, of our society, is crucial in determining whether a conservation program will succeed. And Mr. Wiratno also mentioned that we are going to need concrete recommendations on how to exact those plans in order to ensure an effective conservation program. So, to move on with obtaining those concrete recommendations, I would like to invite our second keynote speaker to share with us his expertise and experience about the scientific authorization of using GPS color in Indonesia. Our second keynote speaker would be Professor Dr. Gono Semiadi from the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. He had been working with the Indonesian Institute of Sciences since 1985, and he's now active as a mammal and wildlife management researcher. Professor Gono Semiadi will explain about the point of view of scientific authority on the use of GPS colors, including the regulations, the rules, the authorization, and important considerations. Professor Gono, are you already with us, sir? Prof, I think you are still mute.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Professor Gono is going to give his presentation in Bahasa Indonesia, and the slides would be in English if I remember correctly. Yes, sir.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Professor Gono, sir, your time is 20 minutes. The stage is yours.
Okay. Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Ibu Faiza. Selamat pagi, Pak Dir. Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu sekalian semua. Background. Jadi saya akan mencoba menyampaikan topik yang diberikan oleh panitia mengenai aturan dan perizinan sebetulnya berkaitan dengan GPS Scholar. Tetapi di sini saya akan mencoba lebih menyampaikan sebetulnya isu yang sedang diangkat oleh pemerintah Indonesia mengenai peraturan-peraturan terbaru. Jadi sebagai pendahuluan, tadi seperti dari Pak Wiranto sudah menyampaikan bahwa GPS itu suatu teknologi yang mungkin harus kita kuasai. Ini tidak lebih daripada situasi Indonesia yang memang memiliki topografi yang sangat beragam, dari yang terbuka hingga hutan yang lebat berbukit, dan ini tentunya akan menjadi habitat yang sangat ideal bagi beragam kehidupan liar. Tetapi di lain sisi akan menjadi suatu penghambat bagi kita peneliti ketika ingin mencoba untuk melakukan penelitian atau monitoring di habitat aslinya. Dan ini tentunya walaupun pada lingkungan habitat yang sedikit agak sudah terganggu, tetap itu merupakan tantangan tersendiri apabila penelitian berkaitan dengan satwa-satwa khususnya yang sangat ilusif, yang sangat soliter, untuk bagaimana kita bisa mendapatkan data yang sangat akurat, reliable dari kehidupannya di alam. Semakin ingin mendapatkan data yang reliable dan akurat, pada akhirnya kita memerlukan koleksi data yang demikian panjang dan koleksi data yang demikian intensif. Dan ini di zaman sekarang, teknologi telah banyak membantu dunia penelitian untuk mencapai apa yang diinginkan oleh dunia penelitian, khususnya ketika ingin melakukan koleksi metadata. Tetapi di satu sisi tentunya pada akhirnya teknologi atau hasil dari teknologi itu tersendiri ada suatu keterbatasan yang diatur oleh beberapa regulasi. Nah, berbicara tentang GPS sendiri, seperti tadi sudah diungkapkan di pembukaan, dan juga sudah dilanjutkan dengan apa aplikasi yang sudah dilakukan di KSDAE, bahwa aplikasi GPS sudah merupakan aplikasi kehidupan sehari-hari kita, baik di perkotaan ataupun di pedesaan. Dan di tingkat dunia penelitian, aplikasi GPS juga sudah menjadi menjadi standar minimum, bisa kita sampaikan seperti itu, yang memang diperlukan oleh para peneliti, khususnya peneliti ekologi kehidupan liar. Dan di sini kita mengakui bahwa teknologi GPS itu sudah lebih praktis dibandingkan dengan metodologi atau alat-alat serumput yang awal muncul ketika kalau dulu harus melakukan triangulasi, kita harus mengarahkan antena. Kalau sekarang dengan teknologi GPS, sebatas kita bisa mendapatkan satwa yang kita inginkan, kita dapat menempatkan GPS itu di satwa tersebut. Setelah itu mungkin kita tinggal mengharvest itu data dari satelit. Juga tingkat kualitas dari data yang diperoleh dari GPS, teknologi itu semakin akurat. Catatan menunjukkan bahwa akurasi lokasi itu terutama di kawasan yang agak terbuka itu bisa mendekati bahkan kurang dari 30 meter dengan pergerakan daripada satwa yang dipasang GPS itu dapat dikatakan 100% dapat dimonitor. Dan informasi setinggi ini pada prinsipnya dengan GPS itu tidak memerlukan banyak energi ketika alat itu sudah terpasang di satwa yang kita ingin teliti. Dan tentunya Indonesia tidak ingin tertinggal di dalam penggunaan teknologi dan metodologi terakhir yang tersedia saat ini, terlebih untuk kepentingan suatu decision maker, pada akhirnya akurasi data itu menjadi key point. Bagaimana rekomendasi itu betul-betul bisa digunakan oleh pemerintah. Nah, topik yang ingin saya sampaikan, ini terutama juga sebetulnya untuk sosialisasi kepada teman-teman yang banyak melakukan penelitian khususnya pada satwa yang dilindungi. Bahwa di Indonesia ini sudah ada satu undang-undang yang menaungi kegiatan penelitian yang kita sebut sebagai Undang-Undang SINAS-IPTEK 2019. Tetapi selain itu juga pada tingkat tapak itu ada peraturan-peraturan khususnya berkaitan dengan penggunaan atau koleksi satwa liar itu yang peraturan dikeluarkan oleh Kementerian Lingkungan Hidup dan Kehutanan atau khususnya di KSDAE. Dan pada level yang paling bawah berkaitan dengan izin-izin yang berkaitan dengan koleksi itu ada peraturan di tingkat otoritas keilmuan, otoritas keilmian tentang bagaimana rekomendasi dapat dikeluarkan. Saya ingin mencoba untuk menekankan 3 hal ini, terutama topik pertama tentang undang-undang itu sendiri, karena ini sudah beberapa kali pemerintah melalui Menristek Dikti mencoba untuk mensosialisasikannya dan untuk betul-betul bisa dipahami oleh seluruh pihak yang ingin melakukan penelitian. Jadi untuk undang-undang ini sebagai Undang-Undang Nomor 1 Tahun 2019 ada beberapa pasal yang sangat prinsipil yang harus kita bisa betul-betul pahami. Pertama, itu pasal 21 di dalam undang-undang itu menyebutkan bahwa hasil penelitian pengembangan wajib dipublikasikan dan didiseminasikan. Nah, ini menunjukkan ada tuntutan kewajiban bahwa data-data yang sudah diperoleh itu tidak selalu di-keep hanya untuk kepentingan proyek, tetapi harus menjadi suatu output luaran yang terpublikasi dan didiseminasi. Didiseminasi ini tentunya pengertiannya salah satunya itu adalah bagaimana memformulasi menjadi suatu masukan-masukan bagi pemerintah yang khususnya berhubungan dengan lingkup penelitian yang dilakukan. Dan di pasal 41 menyebutkan bahwa penelitian itu menjadi solusi permasalahan pembangunan. Ini tentunya sesuai dengan lanjutan di pasal 21. Bahwa data yang Bapak Ibu sudah koleksi itu diharapkan betul-betul menjadi suatu masukan bagi penyelesaian permasalahan pembangunan dalam arti luas maupun dalam arti sempit. Kemudian dilanjutkan kembali adalah dengan pasal selanjutnya, ayat selanjutnya itu yang menyebutkan bahwa bagi pemerintah itu sendiri, hasil penelitian itu wajib digunakan sebagai landasan ilmiah di dalam perumusan dan penetapan kebijakan pembangunan nasional. Jadi di sini kita melihat balance. Bagaimana teman-teman melakukan penelitian untuk wajib mendiseminasi dan mempublikasi, dan di satu sisi lain, bagaimana posisi pemerintah di dalam menghasilkan, mengeluarkan suatu kebijakan-kebijakan itu wajib berbasiskan ilmiah. Berarti di sini betul-betul terlihat suatu kolaborasi dari dunia penelitian, siapapun yang melakukan, dan dari dunia pemerintahan di dalam bagaimana kita mengelola, kalau dalam konteks ini adalah mengelola kehidupan satwa liar. Ini menjadi tanda kutip seolah-olah tanggung jawab bersama antara yang melakukan penelitian dan bagaimana mengejawantakannya di dalam suatu kebijakan. Kemudian untuk selanjutnya di dalam pasal 40 itu ada disebutkan tentang kewajiban daripada data-data tersebut untuk diserah dan simpankan di pemerintah untuk jangka waktu setidaknya 20 tahun. Jadi di sini di pasal 40 itu menyebutnya adanya wajib serah dan simpan data primer kepada pemerintah untuk 20 tahun. Ini tolong diartikan bukan berarti data tersebut secara bebas digunakan oleh pemerintah. Tidak. Pengertian wajib simpan dan depository atau wajib serah dan wajib simpan, kita memahami bahwa ketika melakukan publikasi, ketika kita melakukan analisa dengan teman-teman mitra di dalam negeri atau di luar negeri, ketika data tersebut sangat besar ataupun sangat sedikit, data itu pada akhirnya itu tersimpan di individu-individu. Atau mungkin zaman sekarang data itu memang ada disimpan di cloud. Tetapi cloud sendiri itu dalam konteksnya itu di luar kepada kewenangan jurisdiksi pemerintah Indonesia di dalam konteks kontrol dan segala rupanya. Pada akhirnya pemerintah itu melihat bahwa harus ada kesetaraan di dalam pengelolaan penyimpanan data, baik itu memungkinkan ditaruh di tingkat luar, tetapi harus juga disimpan secara terorganisir di dalam negeri. Untuk itulah pemerintah itu mengeluarkan pasal ini, dan sekarang bagaimana wajib serah dan wajib simpan ini terhadap data primer ini dilakukan itu masih dalam pengemasan. Contoh yang sederhana bahwa selama ini untuk data-data yang mengenai kehati itu ada banyak tersimpan di Lembaga Ilmu Pengetahuan Indonesia, khususnya di Puslat Biologi, sehingga ada suatu isu bahwa wali data sebagai depository, sebagai penyimpan, itu akan dibentuk suatu lembaga. Apakah nanti untuk kehati ada di LIPI, untuk yang spasial ada di LAPAN, segala rupa, itu sedang masih dalam pembicaraan. Tetapi pada intinya teman-teman harus bisa memahami bahwa ketika teman-teman mempunyai data banyak dan itu disimpan di dalam cloud, menurut aturan bahwa itu harus disimpan di suatu mekanisme yang berada di bawah kontrol pemerintah. Walaupun pemerintah itu tidak akan semena-mena menggunakan data itu, tentu tetap ada mekanisme pemberitahuan segala rupa itu ada. Tetapi makanya disebutnya di sini adalah depository, bukan repository. Depository itu ya seperti Anda punya uang, Anda deposit di pemerintah di bank, yang mengambil hanya bisa ya yang namanya tercantum di dalam sertifikat deposito itu sendiri. Nah, Itu yang disimpan itu data primer. Kemudian pasal 77 menyebutkan bahwa semua bentuk analisa pengolahan data itu diharapkan seoptimal mungkin dilakukan di Indonesia sepanjang memungkinkan. Dan ini juga nanti pemahamannya itu kalau memang di dalam konteks penelitian itu di Indonesia memungkinkan untuk analisa di Indonesia, baik itu tingkat laboratorium, baik itu tingkat hanya desk study melalui komputer, itu diharapkan untuk dapat dilakukan di Indonesia sebanyak-banyaknya dan hanya memungkinkan untuk dilakukan keluar Indonesia dalam batas-batas tertentu, antara lain ketika memang belum memungkinkan untuk dilakukannya di Indonesia. Di lain sisi, ini menyangkut kepada suatu kepentingan nasional. Apapun daripada data yang dihasilkan, itu ketika mengetahui bahwa dampak daripada informasi yang dikoleksi oleh Bapak Ibu itu mempunyai tingkat-tingkat sensitivitas tertentu, itu pada akhirnya pemerintah wajib melindungi kepentingan nasional dari dampak penelitian itu sendiri. Ini salah satu mekanismenya itu mungkin dalam hal bagaimana itu harus dilakukan untuk bisa melindungi kepentingan nasional. Nah, ini sebetulnya suatu gambaran yang kami peroleh dari Menristek Dikti untuk menindaklanjuti dari pasal yang ada, bahwa pendanaan itu bebas diperoleh dari manapun juga. Tetapi ketika dana penelitian itu salah satunya bersumber dari pembiayaan asing, walaupun tanpa melibatkan peneliti asing, itu penerima bantuan, yaitu warga negara Indonesia, itu harus betul-betul bisa memperhatikan suatu konteks kemanfaatan dan luaran dari penelitian yang didanai itu adalah untuk kepentingan nasional itu menjadi prioritas. Ini adalah sebagaimana ada dalam pasal 76, nanti khusus kalau memang itu ada mekanisme penggunaan spesimen, maka ada beberapa dokumen-dokumen penting di antar pihak yang harus diselesaikan dulu, khususnya itu masalah yang kita istilahkan sebagai Material Transfer Agreement. Juga masalah MOU itu perlu betul-betul secara jelas itu terungkap bagaimana mekanisme kerjasama ini berlangsung. Nah, secara undang-undang membicarakan tentang pelanggaran-pelanggaran dari implementasi dari undang-undang ini, itu kita bisa dari 3 pasal. Pasal 91 ini yang sangat general, bahwa pelanggaran daripada peraturan sebagaimana tercantum di dalam undang-undang itu, yang pertama yang terringan itu adalah administrasi. Sanksi administrasi ini yang paling sederhana itu adalah penghentian daripada kegiatan penelitian itu sendiri. Tetapi ketika itu pelanggaran itu semakin lebih berat, itu maka akan ada sanksi pidana. Nah, sanksi pidana ini terbagi atas 2, 1 pidana bagi pihak non-Indonesia, pihak asing, dan yang kedua adalah sanksi bagi warga negara Indonesia. Kalau sanksi untuk pidana bagi pihak asing, itu adalah dalam bentuk salah satunya adalah tentang denda setinggi-tingginya sampai 4 miliar dan masuknya ke dalam blacklist untuk melakukan kegiatan penelitian lainnya dalam waktu-waktu tertentu. Itu tergantung daripada pengadilan. Sedangkan untuk negara Indonesia sendiri, itu ketika warga negara Indonesia melakukan pelanggaran, itu maka akan ada sanksi setinggi-tingginya itu sampai 2 miliar atau dipenjara selama-lamanya sampai 2 tahun. Ini terutama ditekankan lagi ketika penggunaan data atau material daripada yang ada di Indonesia ini tidak dilakukan secara benar dengan prosedur yang sudah diberlakukan. Nah, itu Bapak Ibu sekalian, inti-inti dari payung kegiatan penelitian sesuai dengan undang-undang. Sedangkan dari tingkat KLHK sendiri, saya rasa itu sudah banyak dan Bapak Ibu semua sudah paham beberapa aturan-aturan yang ada di tingkat KLHK. Tetapi pada intinya seperti tadi juga dari sudah disampaikan bahwa kalau untuk GPS, secara GPS-nya itu tampaknya memang ketika kami telusuri juga tidak ada regulasi yang mengikat tentang penggunaan GPS sebagai tools di dalam penelitian. Itu mungkin wajar-wajar saja karena GPS itu pada akhirnya sudah menjadi keseharian kehidupan kita semua. Tetapi ketika masuk kepada koleksi atau penggunaan materi dari spesimen dari hidupan liar, khususnya yang dilindungi, atau masuk ke dalam konvensi-konvensi global seperti CITES, pada akhirnya itu memerlukan adanya rekomendasi dari otoritas keilmuan, dalam hal ini LIPI. Jadi untuk di LIPI itu sendiri, kita memfokuskan adalah penelaahan untuk pengeluaran rekomendasi atas kegiatan tumbuhan dan satwa liar. Itu yang menjadi ranah di LIPI. Nah, kalau untuk di LIPI saat ini kalau dulu itu dilimpahkan ke Pusat Penelitian Biologi, tetapi sejak awal di tahun 2020 itu kewenangan ditarik dari Pusdit Biologi, kemudian itu menjadi kewenangan sepenuhnya Kepala LIPI itu diserahkan kepada suatu struktural yang disebut sebagai Sekretariat Kewenangan Ilmiah Keanekaragaman Hayati. Dan di sini secara struktur organisasi itu ada direktur, ada manajer pemanfaatan, dan ada manajer kebijakan sesuai dengan tugasnya masing-masing. Kalau manajer pemanfaatan khusus menangani perdagangan komersial yang ada di lingkup CITES, tetapi manajer kebijakan itu menyangkut dari pemanfaatan non-komersial yang ada di CITES dilindungi, serta berkaitan dengan konvensi-konvensi yang berkaitan dengan KHT yang diratifikasi atau diadop oleh pemerintah Indonesia. Nah, masuk kepada topik tentang penelitian yang berkaitan dengan GPS pada harimau terutama, ini kalau tidak salah bahwa kegiatan ini, tadi nanti juga mohon mungkin dikoreksi kalau salah, memang sepenuhnya akan dilakukan oleh peneliti-peneliti teman-teman dari Indonesia. Walaupun kemungkinan itu beberapa funding kemungkinan ada dari luar negeri. Nah, pengertian funding itu bukan berarti harus uang, tetapi juga semacam batuan-batuan daripada peralatan. Itu konteksnya itu adalah funding resources. Nah, ini memang nanti harus kita lihat bahwa ketika itu ada funding dari luar negeri itu kita memastikan bahwa proyek ini mempunyai clear and clean dari aturan main di antara para pihak tentang akses daripada data dan juga mekanisme dari kegiatan penelitian itu sendiri. Khususnya ketika objek daripada yang di research itu adalah satwa liar, baik itu mungkin ditangkap dari alam atau menggunakan dari lembaga konservasi khusus atau rescue center, dan tentunya apakah akan dilakukan suatu koleksi spesimen. Dan tentunya kalau saya secara pribadi, ketika ini nanti akan dipasang koral dan akan dilakukan pembiusan, tentunya penelitian itu idealnya itu seoptimal mungkin apa yang bisa dikoleksi pada saat pembiusan dilakukan itu dilakukan demi mendapatkan suatu informasi data yang cukup luas dan cukup mendalam. Nah, kalau itu sampai ada koleksi spesimen, katakanlah darah, tentunya dari proyek diharapkan untuk bisa melakukan koordinasi dengan KLHK tentang mekanisme untuk izin daripada koleksi itu darah untuk kepentingan entah itu untuk molekuler atau untuk kesehatan. Dan hal lagi yang lain sama standar ketika itu melakukan koleksi atau penelitian tentang satwa liar, tentunya masalah kesejahteraan satwa itu sendiri untuk diperhatikan. Khususnya ini berbicara ketika pembiusan. Tentu pembiusan betul-betul ditangani oleh ahlinya dan standar daripada koral sendiri itu, GPS koralnya sendiri. Bagaimanakah GPS koral itu ketika masa hidup dari baterainya itu sudah habis, memungkinkankah teknologi yang dipakai itu yang melakukan automatic release ataukah harus dibius kemudian dilepas. Nah, ini tentunya hal-hal yang perlu diperhatikan menyangkut tentang animal welfare. Jadi kalau secara spesifik haruskah GPS-nya itu berizin, seperti tadi di awal disampaikan, dan seperti saya, secara GPS-nya tidak. Tetapi untuk kegiatan tahapan-tahapan koleksi data menyangkut tentang spesimen, itu memang harus ada suatu izin dan rekomendasi. Saya rasa demikian informasi saya untuk penyampaian dari presentasi ini. Saya kembalikan lagi ke moderator. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Professor Gono. I think from this presentation, we learned a lot of important things that we need to consider about using GPS colors as a conservation tool. Well, for starters, we now understand that there are several regulations involved before we can use GPS color as a conservation or management tool. We must refer to the Constitution of Indonesian government and also to the decrees released by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, as well as the rules and regulations from the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. In short, scientific researchers are expected to result in recommendations for government agencies. And it's not only about scientific results, but it's also expected to help answer several questions in regards to economic, industrial, or societal development. All right, so we've already learned about the rules, the regulations, the laws in regards to GPS color applications. And I think it's time we start talking about the real life key issues and considerations about the use of GPS colors as a conservation management tool. Right. Before I invite our third keynote speaker, I would like to remind all participants that you can write your questions in the Q&A box to be addressed by the end of this session. Thank you. And now I would like to invite our third keynote speaker, Dr. Doli Priyatna from Pakuan University and Sumatran Tiger Conservation Forum. He has almost 30 years of experience in conservation with organizations such as the Zoological Society of London and the Landscape Conservation Department of APP Sinarmas. And as one of the pioneers in GPS color applications in Indonesia, who had published writings about the use of GPS colors on tigers, Mr. Doli Priyatna will explain about the key issues and considerations before using the GPS color as a conservation tool. Dr. Doli, are you already with us?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Your time is 20 minutes.
Okay, I will start to share my presentation. So good morning, everyone. Good evening. Probably the ones who in other countries. So my screen is already.
Yes, sir. We can see the screen.
The screen. You can see my screen.
Yes, sir. We can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, okay. I will. So probably I will speak in Bahasa ya, because most of us is in Indonesians, but of course my PPT all in English. So because a lot of things that need to be explained in detail, so I'm not to want to in Indonesian. Jadi selamat pagi Bapak Ibu sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Adapun yang ingin kami sampaikan pada kesempatan ini adalah tentang pembelajaran dari Sumatera tentang penggunaan GPS Scholar dalam mitigasi konflik manusia dengan harimau. Belum berubah ya, Mbak?
Iya Pak, masih di layar yang pertama.
Ya, mungkin kita kembalikan ke ini aja ya. Karena berat kalau ini nih. Kalau menggunakan sepertinya berat.
Baik, jadi mungkin operator bisa dibantu untuk share presentasinya Pak Doli.
Saya tadi udah agak rubah sedikit. Sebentar saya stop dulu ya ini ya. Maaf. Ya, jadi mesti diulang lagi nih. Jadi saya tidak akan menggunakan ini saya atau operator? Oh, saya ya.
Ini operator, Pak.
Oh iya. Tapi
Dibantu atau gimana, Pak?
Ya udah lanjut aja. Dibantu
Oke,
aja
Pak,
supaya tidak menghabiskan waktu ya. Silakan. Next slide please. Ya, tadi sudah disampaikan baik oleh Pak Dirjen maupun Pak Gono bahwa sepemahaman kami ada sebetulnya yang umum digunakan untuk satwa liar terutama harimau ini ada 3 macam ya. Yang pertama adalah yang paling konvensional yaitu VHF radiotelemetri.
Anak-anak.
Ya, jadi VHF Kolar kita biasa menyebutnya. VHF Kolar ini terdiri dari 3 bagian. Yang pertama adalah transmitternya yang biasa kita sebut GPS kolar itu yang dikalungkan di harimau atau di satwa liar lainnya itu merupakan transmitter. Kemudian alat lain adalah receivernya ya. Receiver itu berupa alat untuk mendengarkan signal yang kita cari menggunakan antena. Jadi ada tiga bagian. Nah, selain itu alat ini juga bisa digunakan untuk mendownload data-data. Untuk menentukan. Jadi ini yang paling sederhana. Dia tidak diberikan perangkat GPS, tetapi hanya memberikan signal dia berada di arah mana begitu. Jadi bukan posisi. Sehingga untuk melakukan atau menentukan lokasi paling sedikit kita membutuhkan 2 lokasi yang hampir bersamaan yang menentukan arah datangnya signal sehingga pertemuan antara kedua arah tadi yang biasa kita sebut triangulasi itu merupakan kurang lebih areal atau lokasi posisi si harimau atau satwa liar yang kita pasangi alat transmitter. Lanjut, Mas. Kemudian yang kedua adalah GPS dengan GSM dan UHF Kolar ya. Jadi ini sudah menggunakan teknologi GPS di dalamnya, di mana ketika satwa dipasangi alat ini, itu posisi GPS tentu yang lewat satelit ya, posisinya bisa ditentukan. Kemudian ketika si satwa ini dekat ke kita sebut beacon itu ya, anten dapat signal gitu ya, signal GSM ini bisa datanya bisa diambil gitu ya, dikirimkan kepada kita. Selain itu, ketika ada signal GSM juga bisa kita rubah penjadwalan pengambilan datanya. Jadi ini sistemnya menggunakan GSM. Namun demikian, karena ini perangkat ini juga dilengkapi dengan ultra high frequency atau UHF, jadi trackingnya bisa ditentukan ketika tidak ada signal, dia bisa menggunakan antena juga seperti pada VHF Collar tadi. Tetapi permasalahannya, jika kita pasangkan pada harimau, karena harimau itu harimau Sumatera ya, home range-nya sangat luas, jadi seringkali kita tidak mendapatkan signal yang lewat UHF maupun signal telepon genggam begitu. Jadi ada kendala di sini ya ketika kita tidak bisa mendapatkan signal, itu tidak bisa kita ambil data-data yang terkumpul di dalam transmitter ini. Lanjut. Suara saya kedengaran kan ya, Mas Irfan?
Terdengar, Pak.
Oh baik, saya lanjutkan. Yang ketiga adalah yang paling advance ini ya, yang paling advance ini GPS Satellite Collar. Apa bedanya? Nah bedanya ini menggunakan perangkat GPS juga, misalnya ini ya, ilustrasinya seperti GPS biasa begitu ya, ditentukan lokasi melalui satelit, 2 atau 3 satelit, kemudian data-data ini akan ditransmisikan ke sistem satelit. Jadi biasanya kalau di sistem satelit itu ada Argos, ada Inmarsat misalnya. Kalau yang umum kita pakai di sini yang sering paling tidak yang pernah kami gunakan itu adalah brand dari Followit yang menggunakan sistem satelitnya Inmarsat. Jadi data-data yang terkumpul yang diambil oleh transmitter yang dikalungkan pada beruang ini, itu datanya akan ditransmisikan ke sistem satelit. Nah, sistem satelit itu yang akan mengirimkan ke kita melalui email. Tapi saya dapat informasi dari Pak Bibah kemarin bahwa sekarang sudah lebih maju ya, bahwa bisa nearly real time kita bisa buka website dari provider kita, kemudian kita bisa mengambil sendiri data tersebut. Nah, selain itu data-data juga kadang-kadang permasalahan juga sering terjadi bahwa transmisi dari GPS Collar yang dikalungkan pada binatang ke sistem satelit katakanlah Inmarsat atau Iridium itu ini tidak terjadi begitu, sehingga data terkumpul di dalam GPS Collar. Sebetulnya data itu ada gitu ya di dalam GPS Collar. Ketika si GPS Collar sudah lepas dari binatang, nah data itu juga ada di dalam GPS Collar tadi. Lanjut. Nah, kapan sudah pindah ya? Nah, ini kita saya ingin bercerita tentang pengalaman kita di Sumatera ya. Pertama kali itu setahu saya yang menggunakan VHF Collar itu untuk harimau Sumatera itu terjadi di Jambi ketika ZSL awal mula datang di Indonesia untuk mempelajari harimau di landscape yang didominasi oleh industri di Jambi. Nah, ini cukup berhasil waktu itu ya. Selamat nama harimaunya, ini fotonya ada di sini, terekam oleh kamera trap sedang menggunakan VHF Collar. Itu selama 4 bulan dari bulan Mei sampai September 2013. Nah, kemudian si Collar itu jatuh atau terlepas karena mungkin ketika pemasangan terlalu longgar. Nah, dengan VHF ini untuk harimau yang home range atau berjelajah luas, itu seringkali kita tidak bisa mendapatkan titik triangulasi lokasi harimau ini. Nah, kemudian pada tahun 2005 masih ZSL juga mencoba untuk menggunakan GPS satellite collar untuk dipasangkan di harimau liar untuk tujuan penelitian. Tetapi upaya ini gagal ya. Yang pertama adalah harimau liar ini tidak semudah menangkap harimau yang berkonflik begitu ya. Kita pasang trap di mana-mana, mereka hanya lewat gitu. Kita pantau dengan kamera trap, tidak mau masuk ke dalam box trap. Nah, waktu itu satu kali berhasil karena yang digunakan oleh ZSL waktu itu ada 3 macam untuk penangkapan itu ya. Yang pertama melalui dart atau senjata bius yang dikendalikan dari jauh, dari remote dengan layar monitor. Jadi ketika harimau atau binatang lewat yang mau kita bius itu bisa ditembak dari jarak, dari kejauhan, dari remote menggunakan remote controller. Nah itu gagal. Kemudian yang kedua juga kita menggunakan ZSL waktu itu menggunakan leg hole trap ya. Leg hole trap ini dalam bahasa Inggrisnya biasa disebut Humani leg hole trap ya. Jadi sebetulnya kalau menurut para dokter hewan itu cukup aman karena dia tidak di pergelangan kaki harimau tetapi di jari-jari ya. Jadi di bantalan. Nah, ini juga yang digunakan ketika menangkap selamat yang pertama kali di tahun 2003 itu berhasil dengan leg hole trap. Jadi dengan box trap itu sama sekali tidak pernah berhasil gitu ya selama beberapa tahun untuk menangkap harimau liar ya yang tidak berkonflik. Nah, pernah satu kali tertangkap tetapi kemudian ada fatality ya. Harimau tersebut disayangkan juga mengalami kematian ketika dalam penanganan. Jadi pemasangan ini juga tidak terjadi begitu, jadi batal. Nah, sejak saat itu tidak pernah ada harimau yang ditangkap untuk tujuan studi. Ini mungkin perlu menjadi catatan kita ya. Saya lihat kalau di India misalnya di negara lain itu sudah banyak sekali studi-studi terkait harimau yang memang ditangkap untuk kepentingan studi. Nah, di Indonesia ini belum pernah ada sampai sekarang. Kalau tidak salah, ZSL mencoba lagi beberapa tahun belakangan di Sumatera Selatan atau Jambi, tetapi juga mengalami kegagalan untuk penangkapan karena tidak mudah menangkap harimau dengan box trap. Lanjut untuk harimau liar, pada kasus harimau liar. Nah, kemudian pada tahun 2007 ini ada YPKHS dengan WWF waktu itu juga memasangkan GPS GSM Collar tadi yang sudah saya jelaskan, yang menggunakan mekanisme UHF dan mobile phone ya. Jadi data dikirim melalui mobile phone ketika harimau mendekati BTS ya yang ada signal. Nah, ini juga setelah itu hanya beberapa saat saya ingat ini Mas Narto ya yang waktu itu menjadi leader di proyek ini juga hilang begitu ya karena harimaunya tidak mungkin menjauh dari jangkauan BTS ataupun frekuensi UHF tadi sehingga baik melalui antena maupun mobile phone tidak dapat lagi datanya. Jadi hanya beberapa saat saja. Nah, tapi ini harimau konflik di Riau yang dipasangi ini. Lanjut. Nah, kemudian tahun 2008 Forum Harimau mendapat kesempatan untuk berpartisipasi ya di dalam pemasangan GPS satellite collar yang pertama kali langsung kepada 2 harimau waktu itu di Bukit Barisan Selatan di Taman Nasional Bukit Barisan Selatan BBS National Park di Lampung itu atas inisiatif antara Kementerian Kehutanan waktu itu dengan Tumbling Wildlife Nature Conservation di bawah Artagraha Group. Nah, waktu itu kita Forum Harimau ikut terlibat aktif, mulai dari persiapan sampai pelepas liaran 2 ekor. Saya masih ingat namanya itu Agam dan Pangeran, karena harimau ini harimau yang berkonflik di Aceh. Jadi diterbangkan sejauh 1.350 km kalau tidak salah jaraknya, itu ke Lampung 5 ekor. Jadi 2 pada waktu itu diliarkan dengan GPS Scholar. Lanjut. Ini yang pertama ya, GPS Satellite Scholar pasang pada harimau Sumatera tahun itu. Nah, kemudian pada tahun yang sama juga ada 2 harimau lain, 2 harimau konflik ya. Jadi perlu catat bahwa ini bukan merupakan harimau liar yang ditangkap langsung dipasangi. Jadi harimau-harimau ini sudah berkonflik melalui proses karantina beberapa saat, kemudian baru dilepas liarkan dengan GPS Satellite Scholar juga. Ini yang pertama itu di Ulu Masin, betina dewasa. Ini leadernya waktu itu FFI ya. Saya berkesempatan juga mendapat kunjungan ke lokasi pelepas liaran sebagai bagian dari studi S3 saya waktu itu. Kemudian yang lain adalah 1 jantan dewasa juga berkonflik di Aceh, ditranslokasikan ke 1 lokasi dan dipasangi dengan GPS Satellite Scholar juga. Ini semua menggunakan telefield dengan sistem sistem satelit Iridium ya kalau tidak salah. Tapi yang satu yang di Lampung ada menggunakan GPS Scholar produk Sirtrack dengan sistem satelit Argos. Lanjut. Itu foto di lokasi pelepas liaran yang memang daerah pegunungan. Nah, kemudian tahun antara 2009 sampai 2011 itu ZSL ada bekerja sama dengan stakeholders ya, terutama BKSDA setempat. Itu juga memasangkan harimau yang berkonflik di Sumatera Barat, kemudian diliarkan di pinggiran Taman Nasional Kerinci Seblat. 2 begitu ya, antara 2009 dan 2010. Kemudian salah satu perusahaan swasta waktu itu Sinarmas, saya juga belum gabung waktu itu, tetapi kita atas nama forum juga berkesempatan hadir pada pelepas liaran waktu itu. GPS Scholar ini dipasangkan juga pada harimau konflik di Taman Nasional Sembilang waktu itu. Jadi sekitar 70 km dari lokasi konflik. Nah, tetapi ini yang menjadi pelajaran berharga buat kita. 70 km ini bukanlah jarak yang jauh buat harimau. Jadi si Putri ini ya, harimau yang dilepas liarkan di Sembilang 2011 yang lalu, itu terpantau kembali tahun 2012 oleh kamera trap kami di lokasi di mana dia ditangkap. Jadi 70 km jaraknya. Dia kembali ke lokasi dia. Dan dalam foto itu sudah membawa 2 ekor anak gitu ya. 2 ekor anak. Jadi kita pasti karena kita punya foto awal kemudian terfoto oleh kamera trap, jadi dia kembali pada jarak 70 km. Lanjut. Nah, ini sebagai ringkasannya dari 5 atau 6 harimau di mana kami terlibat waktu itu dalam pelepas liarannya. Yang pertama itu yang di BBS, itu data dikoleksi atau lamanya waktu GPS Satellite Scholar berfungsi sebetulnya kita set untuk 2 tahun. Tetapi ini hanya berapa lama ya yang Pak JD1 ini pangeran itu dari Juli 2008 sampai Maret 2009. Nah, di dalam Kolar sistem ini perlu diketahui bahwa ini juga memiliki sistem auto release ya. Begitu kita targetkan untuk berfungsi sampai waktu tertentu, dia akan dengan sendirinya terlepas dari dari harimau lah dalam hal ini. Tetapi karena mungkin ini karena baterai habis sebelum 2 tahun, jadi dia terpasang terus di harimau pastinya dan tidak pernah ditemukan di mana. Kita sudah coba lacak dengan menggunakan antena VHF yang memang juga dilengkapi dengan antena tersebut ya. Meskipun GPS satellite Kolar tetap ada untuk sebetulnya untuk menentukan apa yang pertama untuk mengambil data ketika ada kegagalan transmisi ke sistem satelit. Kemudian yang kedua juga ketika si Kolar itu sudah jatuh terlepas dari harimau, bisa kita temukan begitu ya dengan bantuan antena VHF tadi. Nah ini summary-nya, jadi rata-rata memang ada bervariasi ya. Ada yang hanya 8 bulan. Ini peta ini menunjukkan lokasi-lokasi tempat pelepas liaran ya. Yang pertama itu di Ulumasen di atas, di utara. Kemudian di Lauser bagian timur. Kemudian ada di Kerinci Sebelat tadi. Ada juga 2 di mana? Di Bukit Barisan Selatan. Saya perlu cerita sedikit bahwa ini yang di Kerinci Sebelat itu yang pertama hanya 7 hari. Kenapa? Ketika kita cek ternyata harimaunya sudah terjerat. Jadi amat penting buat kita pastikan bahwa lokasi yang untuk pelepas liaran itu harus emang terbebas dari ancaman-ancaman perburuan ya. Jadi ada jerat. Jadi memang ini pelajaran yang sangat berharga buat kita. Kemudian di Aceh begitu juga yang di Ulumasin itu meskipun jauh dari mana-mana pakai helikopter waktu itu diterbangkan ke tengah-tengah hutan Ulumasin yang jauh sekali dari desa. Kalau jalan itu 2 hari saya lakukan waktu itu perjalanan untuk menuju lokasi. Tetapi terjeratnya ini sangat ironis bahwa di desa juga begitu ya, di wilayah timur, di Kabupaten Pidi. Jadi di perladangan terkena jerat juga. Jadi harimau itu sebetulnya tidak terlalu menyukai mungkin ya daerah-daerah yang topografi terjal. Memang Ulumasin ini sangat banyak lokasi-lokasi yang sangat terjal gitu. Nah, ini sebagai catatan bahwa ini highlight bahwa semua harimau yang ditangkap merupakan korban dari human tiger conflict dan ditranslokasikan ke area lain yang berbeda. Kemudian juga yang 6 ini itu hanya menggunakan telefield dengan sistem satelit Iridium dan SearTrack dengan sistem satelit Argos. Lanjut. Nah, ini masih summary ya soal data ya. Jadi dari 224 hari atau 223 lah kalau kita clean-kan hari observasi itu data poin yang didapat ini yang di sebelah kanan saya, yang di sebelah kanan data poin yang. Nah, ini juga ada keterangan bahwa yang dikalungkan itu rusak, ada yang lepas otomatis tetapi tidak dapat kita temukan begitu ya karena masanya sudah habis. Kemudian ini keterangannya bisa dilihat. Lanjut saja. Nah, ini apa namanya kalau kita bicara soal performance ya. Performance di sini saya membandingkan data yang bagus. Artinya bagus itu kalau berdasarkan literatur atau referensi yang saya baca adalah data-data yang diambil dengan 2 atau lebih satelit. Itu sudah bisa kita anggap baik begitu ya dibandingkan dengan data yang seharusnya kita dapat begitu. Yang seharusnya kita dapatkan sesuai dengan setting kita. Jadi untuk yang apa namanya televir yang pertama itu yang digunakan oleh Pangeran itu performance-nya performance datanya ya artinya kualitas data itu hanya 32%, kemudian yang Argos hanya 21%, kemudian yang lainnya itu paling tinggi 65%. Kenapa? Karena mungkin areal-areal di kita ini di hutan lebat kadang cukup menyulitkan pengambilan apa namanya posisi GPS yang cukup akurat begitu ya, yang akurat lokasinya. Jadi ini hanya ke situ melihatnya. Lanjut. Nah, namun demikian kita dari data-data yang ada dan terbatas itu kita paling tidak masih bisa melakukan hal-hal apa namanya kajian-kajian sederhana ya. Dari data-data tersebut kita bisa lihat bahwa harimau yang ditranslokasikan ya, saya belum tahu apakah ada perbedaan apa namanya antara harimau yang liar yang ada di situ dengan yang kita translokasikan itu ternyata lebih secara umum sebetulnya apa namanya menggunakan areal-areal yang dominan memang. Kalau memang dominannya di sana perkebunan atau semak belukar ya mereka akan menggunakan semak belukar. Demikian juga lowland. Jadi sebetulnya ini menandakan bahwa harimau ini cukup apa namanya toleran ya terhadap berbagai tipe penutupan lahan. Namun demikian yang perlu jadi catatan bahwa mereka menyenangi daerah-daerah yang terbuka. Tentu ini sangat erat kaitannya dengan keberadaan satwa mangsa juga di sana. Jadi sebagai catatan bahwa untuk menganalisis apa namanya kajian sederhana ini itu 2 minggu pertama datanya tidak digunakan. Jadi ketika kita anggap bahwa dalam 2 minggu untuk beradaptasi ya biasanya ada beradaptasi terhadap apa namanya lingkungan baru begitu. Lanjut. Nah, ini dilanjut saja karena ini hampir sama tadi ya, preferensis dengan dilanjut saja. Juga dilanjutkan saja. Nah, ini juga contoh-contoh apa namanya kajian sederhana yang kita bisa apa namanya lakukan dengan data-data yang ada begitu ya. Jadi untuk melihat apa namanya tipe penutupan lahan yang disukai begitu ya. Lanjut saja. Nah, ini juga data-data tersebut juga kita bisa manfaatkan untuk melihat sebetulnya kapan waktu-waktu paling aktif dari si harimau ya. Kalau saya ini kan harimau ya. Jadi untuk harimau. Jadi bisa kita lihat bahwa menjelang pagi itu ya cukup tinggi ya aktivitas harimau. Dengan sore menjelang malam gitu ya, itu waktu yang paling aktif. Nah, dari mana kita mengetahui waktu aktif ini? Itu di dalam GPS Scholar itu dilengkapi ada data X dan Y ya di situ. Jadi kalau dia goyang ke depan, kolarnya itu ada gitu ya. Ada apa namanya? Ada tandanya. Kalau ke samping itu sumbu Y yang terisi datanya. Jadi kita bisa lihat, oh dia aktif begitu. Sebetulnya data ini juga bisa kita gunakan kalau yang apa namanya referensi yang saya baca untuk perilaku makan juga begitu ya. Bagaimana kalau si harimau itu dia bergerak terus di satu lokasi seperti itu bisa diasumsikan dia sedang makan misalnya begitu. Jadi kita bisa tahu juga nih kapan waktu aktif. Jadi dari data keempat harimau ini kita bisa lihat juga waktu aktifnya harimau hampir sama ya. Jadi menjelang pagi dan sore menjelang malam. Lanjut. Nah, dari data yang ada juga kita bisa lihat bahwa how long their distance traveled ya. So in this study, we found that the tiger travel between 2.8 and 4 kilometers per day, and the female travel more compared to male, and their travel is not random, so they always follow the edge of the forest, so in between open areas and forest, so what we call ecotone, so they always follow that area. Lanjut. Sudah hampir selesai. Nah, demikian juga with the home range, so we can also create a simple home range using fixed kernel analysis. So we found that the shape varied between individuals. So there is an important note as well that translocated tiger is not always use their release site as part of their new home range. Lanjut aja. Also within the home range, not all areas used by the tigers for their roaming. Yeah, for example, here in the picture, the bottom picture, that there is some areas that never been visited by the tigers within their home range. So for example, earlier I explained that the tiger is not always use the release site as part of their home range. This is happened to the male tiger number 3 that released in Lauser National Park. He traveled 31 kilometers leaving their release site, his release site, and then established a new home range there, 31 kilometers away from release site. Lanjut. Yeah, this is Ulumasen. For example, lot of area with steep terrain. Yeah, so the tiger seems doesn't like the area. Lanjut. In Aceh. Ya, ini mungkin summary saja dari yang tadi ini. Summary. So it seems that the tiger movement, especially translocated tiger one, their movement is affected by the topographical condition and the type of vegetation cover dominated their new home range. And the area that preferred by translocated tiger is the area is I already explained earlier that in at the edge between forest and open area. Yeah, of course they prefer below 1,000 meter above sea level and flat and undulating topography within their home range. And then the translocated tiger also choose the natural vegetation that dominated or majority available within the landscape. But forest mosaic of lowland forest and scrub or secondary young secondary forest is the vegetation type their most preferred. Mungkin itu dari saya. Lanjut dulu. Pada kesempatan ini juga ini ada beberapa pihak ya, karena ada Kementerian Lingkungan Hidup dan Kehutanan, ada Arta Geraha Peduli, ada BPKL, Taman Safari, dan lain-lain yang terlibat langsung dalam kegiatan tersebut. Kami ucapkan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Pak Doli. It was such a great
Kelamaan,
presentation,
ya.
and we learned a lot about GPS color application in Indonesia. So now we've learned that since 2003, there had been almost 10 attempts made to study the GPS color application, especially on tigers in Sumatra. And since then, telemetry colors had only been used on conflict tigers. There are no tigers intentionally caught for study purposes, not yet.
Right.
And there's also threats presented by illegal poaching and tiger snares to scientific researchers involving wild tigers, especially, but also other wild animals. So we've already come to the end of the presentation session for session 1. And now we are ready to enter the Q&A session. As we can all see here from the Q&A box, we've already gotten a lot of interesting questions, as well as in our YouTube channel. However, unfortunately, because of the limitation in time, we are only going to choose 3 questions to be answered live by the keynote speakers on air. All right, so the first question here is still related to the presentation by Pak Doli. So satellite connections need minimal forest cover to function properly. So in other words, if the forest cover is too thick, the satellite might not be recording data and there might be data loss. What do you think about that, Dr. Doli Priyatna? If the animals are naturally living in areas with thick forest cover, are there possibilities that there will be more loss of data since the satellite might not be recording data properly? Or is the current technology enough to prevent loss of data?
Langsung ya berarti. Langsung jawab atau nunggu yang lain dulu? Can I answer directly or?
I think it's wiser to just answer directly.
Okay, okay. So regarding the
If
thick
possible.
forest cover,
Or we could move on to the
so
next question first if you're not ready to answer the
yeah.
question.
Okay.
All right, it seems like we're ready to move on to the next question before that question is answered. And just for your information, if the questions are not answered live by the keynote speakers, they will be answered directly in the Q&A boxes. Here we already had several questions answered directly. Okay, we are going to move on to another question. Perhaps this is more closely related to the scientific authorities and also the academia like universities. So for Prof. Gono perhaps, have we considered collaborations between different faculties or different ministries such as perhaps the biology department of a university with the faculty of engineering, let's say, or perhaps between the Ministry of Forestry to the Ministry of Telecommunications? What are the stance from the scientific authority on such a collaboration? Prof.
Last
Gono, I'm
question.
sorry, you're still muted. Okay.
Okay, I just gonna answer in Indonesia.
Okay, no problem.
Oke, jadi kalau kolaborasi tentu itu sangat diharapkan, tetapi yang terpenting itu kolaborasi kalau melihat itu adalah dengan pemerintah itu langsung dengan institusi terkait. Itu yang sangat-sangat diharapkan sekali. Nah, institusi terkait itu pun sangat relatif. Ketika GPS Scholar ini targetnya itu hanya untuk mencoba melihat suatu pergerakan, itu mungkin dengan KSDAE atau BKSDAE. Tetapi ketika outputnya ingin mengarah kepada mitigasi, tentunya kita harus memperluas dengan pemerintah daerah, bahkan sudah tidak lagi dengan Kementerian Telekomunikasi. Jadi itu sebetulnya yang harus kita lihat, kembalikan lagi kepada target dari Anda punya project. Apakah solely targeting only to the animals atau akan lebih luas kepada permasalahan-permasalahan aspek sosial. Jadi itu yang mungkin bisa saya sampaikan. Terima kasih.
Thank you very
langsung
much,
jawab juga
Prof.
atau bagaimana
for
nih?
the answer. And
Saya langsung jawab atau bagaimana nih Mbak yang tadi?
we are moving on to the next question. This is still related to the previous answer, but this one is probably for the representative of the government. Is Mr. Insinyur Wiratno still with us? Or perhaps any of his staff that could help answer this question?
Sambil menunggu Pak Wir, apakah saya bisa menjawab yang tadi, Mbak?
Alright, yeah.
Kan ada pertanyaan tadi. Tadi katanya
Yes,
mau menunggu tiga-tiganya dulu dibacakan, baru dijawab begitu. Tapi ternyata enggak ya. Oke. Saya dalam bahasa Indonesia juga kalau begitu.
Alright.
Jadi saya tadi belum menyampaikan bahwa setelah tahun 2011 ke sini itu sudah semakin banyak ya penggunaan GPS satellite collar tadi. terutama memang untuk kalau kasus harimau ya atau karnivora lain, itu kasusnya semua satwa-satwa yang berkonflik. Mungkin kalau saya salah mohon dikoreksi oleh teman-teman, tapi sepengetahuan saya sejak tahun 2011 sampai saat ini itu semua GPS satellite collar yang dipasangkan semua pada harimau konflik atau macan dahan. Tetapi yang kami tahu itu tidak ada yang berfungsi optimal begitu ya. Kita sendiri mungkin perlu mendiskusikan di sini dengan para ahli dari luar negeri ini, dari Amerika, mungkin bisa memberikan masukan pada kita. Karena investasi untuk membeli dan memasangkan GPS collar ini tidak murah begitu ya. Sehingga kita hampir sia-sia sebetulnya selama ini setiap harimau konflik dipasang, kemudian hanya sampai 2-3 minggu, 1 bulan tidak terpantau lagi gitu. Padahal investasi yang kita keluarkan sudah cukup besar. Nah, kemudian kembali ke pertanyaan tadi ya. Terima kasih atas pertanyaannya. Saya rasa kalau berdasarkan pengalaman, apalagi makin ke sini GPS itu kan makin canggih ya. Makin banyak satelit yang bisa ditangkap atau dimanfaatkan. Padahal untuk menentukan lokasi yang baik ini, kalau berdasarkan referensi cukup dia menggunakan 2 atau 3 satelit. Jadi hutan lebat sepertinya tidak terlalu bermasalah karena di dalam kalau memang lebat sekali kita memang harus lebih intens pengambilan datanya kan itu bisa. Jadi kita berdasarkan keinginan kita, apakah kita mau setiap menit, setiap jam, setiap 30 menit atau setiap hari. Tetapi ini ada konsekuensi berlangganan data, semakin banyak data yang kita minta itu biayanya semakin mahal. Jadi kemarin waktu harimau yang 6 ini itu kebanyakan menggunakan data setengah jam sekali. Jadi kita mendapat 48 data per hari ya. Tetapi pada gajah misalnya sekarang juga banyak ya pada gajah, terutama pada gajah nih, gajah sebetulnya dalam rangka mitigasi konflik sebetulnya. Tetapi gajah agak berbeda ya, gajah tidak meskipun berkonflik dia akan lepasnya di situ-situ juga kebanyakan. Jadi itu yang dimonitor kalau gajah 1 hari 1 kali misalkan. Dan pada gajah saya pikir bisa sekalian tuh. Tetapi tadi ya kembali ke pertanyaan kalau memang akan ada data ya ketika dia di dalam gua misalnya atau di hutan yang di antara 2 bukit yang curam itu akan sulit juga mendapatkan posisi satelit, tetapi satwa atau harimau pada umumnya tidak akan selalu berada di tempat yang demikian gitu. Terima kasih.
All right. Thank you so much, Pak Doli, for the explanation. And I have another question for, maybe this is for the government representative or also the scientific authority representative, because this is regarding the use of data collected from scientific researches, including with GPS color. So we know that data security matters a lot because we just can't give the data freely to just anybody. However, there are times when the collected data needs to be disseminated quickly. Like we need to release the data immediately, such as during human and wildlife conflict, for example. However, with each data release, there are risks of danger to the wildlife itself. For example, poachers may be finding the animals first before government representative could get there. So are there already rules and regulation in place to protect the animals in case of the need of quick data release. For example, when a human-wildlife conflict happens and we need the data as soon as possible, but there's still a risk of unwanted people finding the place first. Are there any regulations to protect from that? Maybe if Pak Weir is still here, or maybe from the Directorate of Wildlife Conservation.
Mbak
Yes,
Fauzia ya.
yes, Pak Kris, you may speak in bahasa.
Saya sampaikan tadi sebenarnya yang disampaikan oleh Pak Gono itu sudah sangat clear ya, bahwa data itu adalah belong ke pemerintah, dan terima kasih Pak Gono bisa menjelaskan sehingga semua yang ikut di dalam webinar ini bisa memahaminya. Dan memang yang menjadi permasalahan di kita sekarang bahwa semua kan server masih ada di luar nih, sehingga kita dari KLHK itu mencoba sekarang untuk mencari solusi apakah nanti server-server itu bisa dibangun sendiri di Indonesia, sehingga data-data itu nanti memang sangat benar-benar ada di Indonesia dan bukan keluar. Dan kalau memang nanti memungkinkan kita bisa komunikasi dengan pihak Telkomsel atau Kemeninfo untuk mendiskusikan ini ke depan, gimana supaya data-data ini bisa di-keep di dalam negeri, mungkin itu yang menjadi pemikiran kita. Tapi yang seperti yang soal data tadi saya pikir sudah sangat clear disampaikan oleh Pak Gono. Terima kasih Mbak Fauzia.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pak Kris, from Directorate of Biodiversity Conservation, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So right now, we still have 18 questions waiting to be answered. However, since there are limitations on time, the other questions will be answered directly by the keynote speakers on the Q&A session. I'm sorry. So now that brings us to the end of the first session. I would like to thank all keynote speakers for the presentation, for sharing their expertise and experiences with us. I do believe that we are going to end this session with a renewed sense of knowledge and also new spirits to learn more and to apply GPS color tools as a monitoring tool in conservation. Now that's the end of session 1. I also would like to apologize for all of my mistakes during guiding this first session. Thank you very much for all your attention, and now I'm returning it to Ms. Adinda. Thank you so much.
Yes, yeah, thank you for this our discussion. And it's time to short break. Make sure you will be back after. Okay, make sure you will be back after 2 minutes. So see you later. So, hi, welcome back to webinar Lesson Learned GPS Scholar Application in Wildlife Conservation Management. And welcome in this second session. For the second session, we'll be led by Mr. Haryo Tabavibisono. He is from Sintas Indonesia Foundation. He is a well-rounded conservation practitioner with more than 25 years of professional experience. So, Mr. Biba, are you with us now?
Yes, Dinda. Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Biba, the stage is yours. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Dinda. Dinda is my staff in Sintas Indonesia. She joined the organization since the beginning. So literally, she does almost everything for us, including to become an MC here. Thank you again. Okay, it's an honor for me to facilitate this very important event. So first of all, I would like to thank you so much to all the speakers in this webinar for joining us to share your valuable experience in GPS Scholar applications on wildlife. Sintas Indonesia engaged Forum Harimau Kita and other participants to initiate this very important event because as a practitioner, I learned more failures than successes in GPS Scholar applications on the Sumatran tiger especially. So I think it is very important for us here to learn from international experts who have a solid experience in GPS color applications, especially on large mammals. So at the end, we have we hope inputs from these international experts can be used to develop a protocol for guidelines or guidelines on GPS color applications on large mammals. We will have someone at the end of this webinar, Dr. Iding Haidir from the Ministry of Forestry. He will summarize all the discussions. So for time efficiency, I will go through all speakers without making any summary. So in this session, we have 3 speakers actually, as has been introduced by the previous moderator. So let's say hello to our speakers. We have Dr. Carl Treholt here. Hi, Carl. I can hear.
Yeah, I just
okay.
need to unmute. Yeah.
Okay. Nice to meet you here. Carl is the director of Asia program, I think, of the Copenhagen Zoo. Let me correct me if I'm wrong. So thank you so much for your time. And the second speaker will be Dr. Matthias Tobler. He is my supervisor actually from the San Diego Zoo. Hi, Matthias, are you there? Matthias?
I am, sorry. I didn't expect, I didn't have my microphone on. Hello.
Okay, so you are the acting director of population sustainability of the San Diego Zoo Global. Yes. Thank you for your time. And last but not least, Samia Ikaril, is she here with me? Okay, nice to see you again here. Nice to see you again here. I think after 2 years, yeah. Yeah. Samia is an independent researcher, but I know she has a solid field experience, especially in GPS color application on jaguar, yeah. 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 So thank you so much. So let's start with our first speaker, Dr. Carl Treholt. Carl will talk about GPS, about GPS color application on large ungulates, key issues and considerations. It's a very important topic because we would like to have key inputs from you for our national protocol on GPS color application. So I did not have your resume, so please introduce yourself briefly before you start your talk. Just briefly, and your time is only 20 minutes, so time is yours.
Okay, good. Almost noon for me here. I'm in Kuala Lumpur right now. I'm a Danish citizen, but have been based here in the region for the last 30 odd years, working with conservation. So of course I spent a lot of time in Indonesia as well, and in the region here. Then I would like to thank you to say thank you to, of course, Harimau Kita Forum and to Pak Wiratno and the Diagen and everybody else that has been involved in setting this up. Let me just try to start this thing up if I can. Oops. Probably will be this one. Can you see the screen now? Hello.
Yes, yes,
we
Carl.
can see.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Perfectly.
All right. Yes, so I'm actually working for Copenhagen Zoo in the Research and Conservation Division. You can see my email is at the bottom there in case anyone wants to contact me. The other thing I just want to mention is that I will do most of this in English. Maaf ya semua orang Indonesia. Terkadang mungkin saya pindah ke bahasa Indonesia juga, tapi biasa memang itu lagi senang untuk saya untuk bicarakan dalam bahasa Inggris. So this will be in English. Okay. GPS coloring wildlife and we're using GPS and satellite and GSM systems. There's nothing new, as our colleagues have already mentioned. There are many manufacturers now. There's Vectronics is a German system. Follow it. The old Tilleville is a Swedish system. Telonix is a US-based system. African wildlife tracking, of course, is from South Africa. ATS is a US-based system as well. And as Lotec, for some of you that has been in the business for a long time, Lotec is actually the combination of BioTrack from UK and Sertrac from New Zealand. And they all work pretty much in the same way. They have their own, methods to go about these things. They all have strengths and weaknesses. The basics are basically similar. You tag an animal and you can relay information via either satellite or UHF, or you can go out with a mobile phone and use the GSM network, or you can use the old manual either UHF or VHF system. And in certain cases, it's actually uploaded to a cloud-based system, and then you can use either your mobile phones or computers to access the data. One thing I think you need to distinguish between before you actually choose what color, which manufacturer that you're going to use. Some of them have only PC or phone apps. It's actually the data is transmitted or operated via an apps that you have to download either to your PC or your phone. And of course, this gives very good opportunities to add a lot of technical controlling things that you can do dual way from either your phone or from your computer. The downside of it is, of course, yeah. Everything okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The downside of this is, of course, since it's app-based, you have to actually bring along whatever what do you call it, instrument you want to use. So if you don't have your phone along or your computer along, you can't necessarily access the data from another computer, so to say. So the important thing is that you have a number of standard opportunities. I mean, you need to be able to have live data transmission as close as possible. You also need to be able to save to a local database. You interface with Google Map or Google Earth, and you can actually regulate or change configuration online or over the air, as it's called. You can use a receiver, or you have an interface with that, and all these kind of things. Those are the basics that you really need to make sure are in the system. There are other companies, they are actually using a web-based system which has got other opportunities and weaknesses as well. It's not necessarily as powerful as an app, but it's got that big advantage that you can access this from any computer, any mobile phone, as long as you got internet connection. And then you can sit anywhere in the world and then access these kind of things. Also, you can actually send a note to somebody else, a colleague and so on, that can access the same system in a different part of the country or the world. But of course, today, a lot of these manufacturers, they are combining these things. So we actually have both options, which makes it even better. The typical way you receive a lot of the information from these transmitters is just a lot of numbers, basically, an abbreviation. And for these are some emails, for example, from one of the transmitters. The number is up here, as you can see. This is the transmitter number, the configuration file number, and then you have a lot of hullabaloo here and a lot of emails coming in. And the thing is, what it really means is that you have, of course, the date, the time, and then you have something called time to fix. And that is a very important parameter when you actually configure the transmitter, because this is how much time a transmitter needs to look for a satellite or waypoint before it actually stops trying. This is, of course, battery consuming. And if you're in a tall rainforest, it can search and search and search for ages, and it doesn't get enough satellite to log in a waypoint, and then it just wastes its battery. So usually you can actually decide how much time, half a minute, 30 seconds, or 90 seconds, or whatever, 60 seconds, latitude, longitude. And then the number of satellites is also important, because the more you have, the better usually it will be, the more accurate it will be. And if you have enough, you will usually get data in 3D, the altitude in meter. And then I'll get back to the red column, but then the temperature, of course, the ambient temperature. This is not the temperature of the animal. This is actually the ambient temperature or the environmental temperature. Then you have the other things here. The XYZ is, of course, the movement pattern. In some cases, if you can see, there's horizontal movement. It might still be an animal that is lying down. If you have one where you actually see the C thing where you're actually moving forwards or backwards, that's a typical high activity pulse. So you can see, for example, in this particular case down on this line, this animal has been moving quite a lot one way or the other. Coming back to this H-stop thing, basically what it means, D-dop or G-dop and so on, is actually a measurement of how accurate your location or your data is. H-stop really means horizontal dilution of precision. This is basically the horizontal accuracy, vertical accuracy, V-dop, P-dop position, which is usually the 3D one, and a T-dop, a time precision. Of course, all of them has its advantages. If you are doing something where you want to see how far or how fast a bird flies in an hour or 2 hours, for example, the time, the T-dop would be very important, and so on. So it's not necessarily the most commonly used, which is H-dop, and then P-dop, which is actually just P-dop is basically this column. So this is just for sort of general information. The other thing that I've noticed many places in the world, including Indonesia, is that a lot of people using GPS collars, but there's not so many that are actually using this online database. It's actually in Leipzig, in Germany at Max Planck Institute. They're hosting something called MoveBank, and it's actually a cloud-based database. The good thing is if you sign up for this thing, then all your data, if your radio transmitter is actually using the Excel, for example, or text-based recording in the columns, you can actually have your own database, your own sign-in code, and so on. So a lot of people, they think that it's unsafe, but it's as safe as your bank account in a way, because you need your username and password and so on. And as you can see here, we are on from the Baluran Bunting project, Baluran Leopard project, and also Javan Leopard in general. And you can also see there's other people and NGOs and governments using MoveBank. And I can warmly recommend it because there's a lot of analytical features in this, where actually all the data that you receive on an email, for example, or on your apps, would also automatically go straight into MoveBank. So in that sense, you actually have a very an automatic backup system. Should you lose your computer, or you forgot to back it up, or all these kind of things, then everything else would, all the data would be lying in MoveBank in the cloud. And like I mentioned, it's got fairly powerful analytical systems. It's not as powerful as independent like GIS programs, QGIS or ARC or Esri and these kind of things. But it would probably do 95% of what all of you in that are participating now actually needs to do movement and home range and all these kind of things. So coming back to actually the biggest challenge, you can see this poor tapir here. It gets spooked. You can see in the background there's a trap over here, a cage trap. And the biggest challenge is really not about the transmitter, it's about trapping the animal. And you can see he doesn't really like the flashes, and this is a couple of years ago, or actually almost 15 years ago, and we had no idea of how much these animals was affected by the normal xenon flash. You can see over here we have an infrared camera, and of course it can't see that, it doesn't respond to that at all. But eventually when the normal flash goes off again, it runs away. So instead of going into a trap. So that's a missed opportunity just because of the camera. But finally, of course, when we do capture it, it's not always so nice. When you have a large mammal in a trap, in a box trap, in the rainforest, of course, they make everything very muddy. You have to sedate them in most cases before you can deploy the transmitter. Afterwards, of course, it's important that you can monitor the first 2 or 3 weeks of we caught it actually here, and then what is it doing. This is the most critical part because this is where we will really be able to tell whether the animals is alive or not. Hopping back to Indonesia, in Baluran National Park, the same, we're capturing them as the real difficult challenge here. In this case, we have actually a hookshot, or a place where a person sits with a tranquilizer gun, but it's a real challenging thing. You can't move at all. They're extremely shy, these animals. It's easy in Alas Purwo because the bunting there, they don't really seem to be very much afraid of people. So of course, after a couple of minutes, this thing goes down, or basically it's asleep. And of course, at night, it's also difficult to really make sure that you can find this thing again. So we use some transmitter darts that has got a little radio beacon on as well. So we usually would use them, and we can find it at night. Here you can see a typical image of where the buntings are, not in this particular case, but also some of the the things that a transmitter online would show. This is actually the battery status. So you can go online and then check these kind of things. If this is down on the yellow, it's always a good idea to go out and find the animal and then release the transmitter again. Of course, this is transmitter that is still in the office, whereas this one is in the field. To capture, again, the biggest challenge is capturing them, like Pak Supriyanto mentioned. It is very difficult for even tigers to walk into a cage trap. We tried it many times with leopards for more than 2 years, and you can see here we've got the trap, and we even have a small goat baby or a chicken or a little piglet inside. And this leopard just doesn't want to go inside. They're too shy. They don't like the smell of humans and so on. So as you can see, it just walks away again. So
Hello, Carl.
Hi, Carl. Is he gone? Or just me? Hi, Carl.
I think Carl is having a bit of
A trouble with the... Okay.
yeah, this internet connection.
Let's wait a moment. Yeah, he is disconnected, I think. Should we move to another, to the next speaker and have Carl later?
Boleh, Pak.
The organization.
Boleh,
Yeah,
Pak Bib,
just
mungkin lanjut dulu.
try to contact Carl through WhatsApp or whatever. Make sure that he will be on. Okay. Is that okay, organizer? Okay, let's move to the next speaker and have Carl later once he is connected to the internet. Next, he's here now.
yes,
Okay.
sorry
Yeah.
everyone, I just got disconnected from here. I hope I'm back on.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
let me just put this one. All right, so I was just talking about, we got some new snare trap that is much stronger, they're faster, and that's really needed for large cats. They're much more agile than you would actually imagine. So we managed to do that. And you can see sometimes it's good, some leopard or macan ini sudah banyak pintar, dia sudah naik bis di Cirebon dan sampai Jakarta dan naik pesawat sampai Baluran. Of course not, but sometimes we actually start with switching on the transmitter just to test them, and that's a real good thing to do as your SOP, your standard operational practices, because sometimes it's really silly if you put it on and you haven't tested it before and then it doesn't work at all. Let me just jump to a different part of the world where we also have a project which is a totally different challenge we face there. It's muskox on Greenland. As you can say, this is not, or it's not like they're going to war. They have actually a rifle and a normal dart gun, and it's because there's also a lot of polar bears in the region. But there you really have to walk many hours every day until you find some muskox. And the good thing is that when they get scared, they will actually just circle around, and then sometimes, of course, it gets really cold and you have to work with in sub-zero temperature and lots of snow. And because of the weather, you have to be very fast. So these things, they don't start freezing too fast as well. The other thing that is nice when it's a fairly open terrain, not like in a rainforest, is that we will usually use a Google Earth interface, because you can see the 3D contours and these kind of things is much more accurate than just the normal map. If you're in a rainforest in Sumatra or Borneo or West Malaysia, it's very difficult because it's all green. It looks the same anyway. Jumping to another continent, which is Africa, the challenge is not as big there to capture things because of the openness of the area. When you deal with large mammals, usually you use helicopters and they're darted from a helicopter, and then you can actually go down and work with the animals. We're doing what we call standing sedation, so they're actually still sort of awake, but not totally asleep. And even for Indonesians, it's possible to actually get close to a nice rhino. So it's something that can be done fairly fast there. And the same thing goes with large cats. When we do the lion tranquilization and so on, this is the lion actually, just for your information. And it's quite easy because, as you can see here, even for our friend and colleague, the cats are not that scared of you, so you can tranquilize from either a helicopter or from a car. So all these things, it seems to be great, but this is just so nice, everything works well. But I think most of you that have worked with it have figured out that this is just a really frustrating thing. It fails and fails, and there's more failures. And our experience is actually sometimes, or very often, the transmission stops after 1 month, or even sometimes just a few days. And we figured out actually it seems to be based on humidity. And I'll just get back to that a little bit longer. They are waterproof, all of them, but a lot of times they fail very fast anyway. Sometimes they fall off. That happens also quite often. And if this is actually a self-release, that shouldn't have happened. It's usually related to either battery error or there's low battery, because most of them, they're programmed, or you usually will program them to release the color when the battery becomes very low, because otherwise you'll end up with the animal running away with the whole thing and you never be able to find it again. Battery failure or reduced lifespan is usually a configuration issue before you put it on. Again, here we go back to TTF, a time to fix. If you want the transmitter to look for GPS or satellite for a too long time, it eats a lot of battery. The same if you want to send too many emails to you in too short times and these kind of things, it eats a lot of battery. So this is usually something you can deal with in the configuration file. So it falls off or broken and so on. I can only say that it's about being creative. Our experience is that on large cats, on bears and these kind of things, they never really are broken or pulled off. But with a lot of the large ungulates, muskox or bunting or tapirs and even the seladang in Malaysia, they very often are pulled off. I think it's simply because of either fighting each other or like tapirs is simply because they don't have a distinct neck, so they don't sit very well in the first place, or they go through branches and it gets stuck there and they just pull it off. Limited amount of data to me is one of the biggest challenges here, and it's something to do with most people that work with it. They say, oh, now we have a GPS or satellite color, and then they just leave it like that. And then they sit back home and then you just get a movement data. But the thing is here, movement data is only a very small part of what you can use these things for. In Greenland, we've also added another probe that actually measures the acidity and in the stomach and other things. So it's something that can be expanded. And the other thing also, the limited amount of data, if you only want to look at the movement, then it's a very expensive way of getting just a few waypoints. These transmitters can't give you the behavior, what they eat and these kind of things. So you still need to get into the field and work as hard as before. It makes it a lot more easy now because you normally can go and find the animals within a few hours or directly out to find the animals because you know where it was just a few days or a few hours ago. This part is the weak component in all of these transmitters, and that is the communication unit that actually sends your data to the satellite and to your email. And we have tried to actually cover that with some soft style epoxy, and it seems to work really well. We don't have any issues with these colors in Greenland or in South Africa because it's dry, generally speaking. Even when it rains, it's much drier in terms of humidity. And in Greenland, we have colors that are working for more than 2 years without failure. We had 29, 29 colors that didn't fail for 2 years. Whereas in Malaysia, in the rainforest here with tapirs, we often have a failure after a week or 2 months or so on. So the alternatives to some of these things depends, of course, how big an area, what kind of terrain. But nowadays, there are more and more technology coming in on what we call nano colors. And in reality, they're more or less the same thing as you can see here. There's a little transmitter that records your waypoints and temperatures and all these things, but they don't have this COM unit sitting on the top of it. And that makes them much more reliable. The only thing is that you have to have a UHF downloading device at the same time. So you need to get into close proximity of these things, of the animals. But you can see the cost of these things, GPS, UHF radio, is a lot lower than some of the others, which can go up to $2,000 or $3,000 per unit. For all of them, of course, they can self-release and you can recover them again. They also work with VHF beacons, so you can actually find them again. EOPS is a German-based company that are using a lot of technology in that direction with e-tags and these kind of things that you can actually use without batteries, or a lot of them are solar powered and these kind of things. So in theory, they can last forever. Cellular tracking technologies is another one, is based in the USA, a similar system. And for smaller reserves or even bigger reserves, you can also put up a UHF station that will actually basically download all the data. If you have a tiger or leopard or bunting that comes within a few hundred meters of a base station like this, then it would actually download these things, and this thing can send the whole thing via email to you or something like that. And you can see the cost is high, but if you have 3 or 4 of them, let's say in Baluran National Park, then we will cover pretty much the whole park, and we will get the data we also will get from a GPS satellite system. The downside is, of course, we don't get real-time data, so we still have to go out and look for them with a normal VHS beacon. So maybe one day we can all dance and cheer and be happy about it all, but there's no easy fix to this. You just have to work harder in many cases. And that is my contribution today. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Carl. There are a lot of inputs for us, I think, as expected, especially those related to challenges and key issues that we should consider in the development of the protocol. Thanks again. Just stay with us. Okay, next we will have Dr. Matthias Tobler. Matthias.
Thank you. Let me see. I can share my screen here.
Let me introduce you first.
Okay.
Okay, Matthias will talk about advances in GPS core technologies and methods for data analysis and their implication for wildlife management. You may introduce yourself before you start your talk. Your time is 20 minutes, so time is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good to go.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to participate here, and apologies if some of my things I'm going to present are somewhat redundant after the great presentation from Carl and Dolly Pratna before. I think they covered some of the things I'll be covering, but I might look at it from slightly different angles. From my background, I haven't really done any research in Indonesia. A lot of my research has been in Peru, in the Peruvian Amazon, which, interesting, it's very similar forest than the forests in Indonesia. So it's lowland rainforest, we have pre-montane rainforest and higher elevation forests. So the environment is actually very similar. I've worked on similar species too. I've worked on tapirs, I've worked on jaguars and pumas, which are the largest carnivores in that area. And then I'll have other examples from bighorn sheep in the deserts and, like Carl, a couple of examples across the world. But I'm much more going to focus on the technology and just use some of those species as illustration. Just a quick slide about the history of animal tracking. So some of the first scientific tracking studies started in the 1800s, where people started putting bands on birds, and that was just generally gave them 2 locations at the time when a bird was first captured and banded, and then another time when the bird was recaptured, maybe later it was found dead. A little later, in the 1930s, people started tracking migratory birds with radar when they passed through, and it was mainly flocks of birds that could be seen on radar screens. And what we call telemetry, where we actually can locate animals using a transmitter, was first actually done in the 1950s using acoustic telemetry for marine animals, where we have an acoustic sensor giving out a ping and a microphone picking that up. And that technology was developed when sonar was developed during the Second World War to track submarines. And the VHF telemetry that we've heard so far a couple of times already was developed in the 1960s. So that's when radio transmitters became available. You see a picture up there of a bear being tagged by in Yellowstone, and one of the early tracking receivers. And that technology really hasn't changed that much since that time. It's still the same idea. We have a transmitter that transmits a very narrow signal on a specific frequency, and the receiver that picks up that signal, and then we can use that to locate the animal. PID tags are interesting. There are little tiny microchips that can be injected under the skin of animals or can be implanted in ear tags. But again, in that case, we need to get close to the animal. We can re-identify it. There was technology in the 1990s where it was used a lot for, especially marine mammals, such as geolocator, which locates animals based on the daylight, the number of hours of daylight. So it was a very coarse location technology, but it allowed for long-term tracking. And then things really changed in the 1990s when GPS became available, and the colors have consistently evolved, but also we heard we still have a lot of issues. So I'll be talking a little bit about the evolution of these systems. We've already seen VHF transmitters, and they really come in all shapes and forms. Giant ones for elephants and tiny ones that can be put on bats and beetles, and really, really light sub-gram transmitters. The big advantage of VHF transmitters when we talk about larger mammals is that they can last for a long time. Like we can have transmitters last for 5 years or more, depending on the battery size. They're relatively lightweight because they don't need as big of a battery as a GPS collar. But they have a limited range, especially in dense forest. And in our experience, we often get less than a kilometer range if we're tracking an animal from the ground. If we're up on a tower, we might get 3 to 5 kilometers of range. A lot of times to really get long ranges, we need to get up in the air. So a lot of our early work with VHF collars, we really needed to have an airplane to track animals, especially if we're talking wide-ranging animals such as jaguars or tigers or elephants, and any of these species that move over long distances. It's hard to keep up with it on foot. So a lot of the VHF studies really depend on airplanes to locate animals, which obviously increases the cost significantly, and it also reduces the number of locations you can get. And then in the 1970s to 90s, the US Army started developing a GPS network, and we'll see a lot of these technologies that we're using for wildlife tracking actually came out of military development. So GPS was one of those examples that was developed for military use. And then in the 1980s, it became available to civilians, mainly for aviation, where GPS has been used for airplanes to get accurate locations on long distance flight. The system was completed in 1993 with 24 satellites available, and has since grown to about 34 satellites for GPS. And then there's the competing or parallel system, the GLONASS system by Russia, Galileo by Europe, Beidou by China. Unfortunately, a lot of these are actually compatible, and newer GPS units can use satellites from different systems at the same time, which really increases the coverage and the number of satellites available for tracking. So again, GPS collars, as we've already seen, have come in a lot of different shapes and forms, from big mammal collars to much smaller collars. And with the advances in solar technology, now we have GPS collars that we can put on birds or tortoises that are small enough and to actually go on these smaller animals. There's some models that come as an ear tag. Again, since there's no big battery, they depend on solar. And some tiny models that actually do depend on battery, but can be put on smaller birds, but unfortunately only last for a few days or weeks maximum. So GPS collars, the limiting factor is really still the battery. Battery capacity has increased and GPS battery consumption has decreased. So we definitely get a lot more data out of collars these days than we used to get 10 years ago. But batteries are still the main thing that limits the number of locations we could get with the GPS, assuming that they work. So my modern GPS collar that would be used for a tiger nowadays can get up to 10,000 locations. They always include a VHF, almost always include a VHF transmitter, so the animal can be located, or the collar can be located after it drops off. And in all of our projects, we definitely always use a drop-off mechanism. We don't want to leave a collar on the animal. And for a lot of the animals we work with, recapturing the animal would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. So we always use a drop-off mechanism that automatically releases the color after a predetermined time, or when the battery gets low, or both. As we've heard before, that one of the main drawbacks with GPS color is really the high cost. So a basic GPS color these days is still about $1,500, and more advanced models can go up to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 depending on the sensors we're adding. Data transmission, Carla, you mentioned some of that too. The most basic way of getting your data is by UHF download, which is a good option for species that don't move very far. The thing is, you need to get within a few hundred meters generally to download the data, especially in forest environments. In more open areas, you could probably download data from up to 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers away. But in forest, you need to get fairly close to the animal. And again, that's challenging if we're talking a jaguar in the middle of a rainforest or a tiger up in the mountains. It takes a lot of effort to get to these animals. So in those cases, UHF might not be the best option. It's definitely something to look at, or if there's a way of setting up automatic station that Carl explained. It's something that can be done, but the data doesn't come back in real time, and it could require a lot of effort. Argus uplink is another. So there's 3 satellite systems: Argus, Globalstar, and Iridium. Iridium is currently the only one that has a 2-way communication, which allows actually to reprogram the collar, to send commands to the collar. So if you want to change the GPS schedule, we see the collar is running low on battery. We can actually update the GPS schedule and take fewer locations, or we can even trigger the drop off to release the collar when we see the battery is low. The other 2 systems don't allow that. A system we used on bighorn sheep that live in open desert habitat was a new collar by Certrac that has solar panels. And that's really for those species that live in open areas where there's lots of sun, solar panels really change the way we can use GPS collars. So again, the regular, we use 2 models, one with GPS, with solar, and one without. The one without solar, we could collect a location every hour for 2 years. With the solar panels, we collected location every 15 to 30 minutes, and they lasted 3 years, and that's where we had the drop-off program. They probably would have lasted longer, so they could last 3, 4, 5, 6 years on an animal, which is really changes the way we can collect data, and we can collect data much higher temporal resolution. Another new sensor that's been increasingly advancing is an accelerometer, which is a device that registers movement, and it can continuously register movement with very little battery usage, which means we can record these activity patterns over a long period of time continuously. Whereas a GPS collar, we might get a location every hour, the accelerometer can collect data 24 hours a day. And here you see a little test we did a few weeks ago on a cheetah here at the San Diego Zoo, where we were testing one of these accelerometer collars, and you can get a lot of information on that, on behavior, on energy expenditure, and I'll talk more about that later on in the presentation. So that's one of the new sensors, not new, relatively new. They've been around for a couple of years now, but they're also improving the amount of data they can collect, and now with high resolution accelerometers, we can really collect 30, 40 movements per second for up to a year. Another advance is camera collars, where we put a camera on the collar that can film or take photos or film what the animal sees. And that's especially useful for prey selection or for foraging studies for ungulates. And we can also link that camera data with the accelerometer data, and I'll show some examples of that later on. As we've heard throughout these presentations, reliability is definitely an issue, and it's no different for us, right? We've used probably 4 or 5 different brands. We have used about 10 different types, models of collars, and among all of them, we had failures. So the bighorn sheep collars I was showing, out of 10 collars, 5 collars failed. The other 5 lasted for 3 years, so it doesn't mean that all of these fail. For jaguars, jaguar studies were probably 10, 15 years ago. So a lot of the technology was very early GPS technology. we had pretty much all of them fail prematurely, same for taper colors. So it's definitely a continuous issue. I do think that the technology evolves. Drop-off technologies that we've used has been very reliable, fortunately. So that means even if the color fails, all the colors that we are aware of actually did still release, and none of the colors stayed on the animals. Another problem that was mentioned before is still GPS signal acquisition under dense canopy. Current modern GPS units are definitely more sensitive than previous generations, so we get better signals. And again, with the addition of new satellite systems, we have a better chance of getting a signal under dense canopy. And the other challenge with the ones that have satellite uplink is getting data out of the canopy back to the satellite, which is even more challenging than receiving a signal through the canopy. So often we don't get, it's possible that a week or two passes and we don't get any transmissions, and then the animal spends some time outside of the forest or in a more open area, and then we get all the locations down. So often when we follow these animals, one starts to panic and thinks something went wrong, and then suddenly the GPS is able to transmit data back again. So these are definitely issues. So what data can we get? Obviously, home range size is one of the most basic ones. That's what everybody thinks of when we think about GPS or VHF colors. Home range usage and movement within a home range, habitat selection, landscape connectivity, interactions among individuals. We can get an activity pattern, behavior, and then energy usage. So for home range estimates, some of the earliest estimates were the minimum convex polygon, which basically means we just draw a polygon about the outermost points, or we discard maybe 5% of the points and then draw a polygon around it. It's the most basic home range estimator. And here the data you're seeing is from a jaguar in the Peruvian Amazon, just so you get a reference. And the home range size of that animal is about 340 square kilometer, based depending on the estimates. Another fairly well-established and widely used method is the kernel home range, where we use a smoothing kernel to kind of look at the density of points across this area, and then create a density function and cut that off at, again, at a generally 95% threshold. Some newer models actually use the information, the time information, because each location has not only the coordinates, but also time. So we know when the animal was at each location, and we can kind of interpolate in between and start creating these movement trajectories. So we can use that to better inform where the animal was between 2 points by using some movement models to say, look, if the animal was here time A and here time B, it was somewhere in here, and we use some random movement in here to say, well, here's the probability where the animal would have been in between these two locations. So that helps us to even get improved home range estimates that take the movement into account in the modeling part. Here a quick example that compares VHF and GPS and shows you how far we've come. So this on the left, these were GPS locations from the same animal that were collected by overflights, which obviously was very limited because we could only fly every couple of days. And during every flight, you only get 1 point. So you would only get per day, or every 2 or 3 days, you might get 1 or 2 locations. At the same time, the GPS collected a point every 15 minutes, lasted about 4 or 5 months, and we had about 40% success rate. So on average, about a point every half hour to an hour. And we can see that the home range size based on GPS data is obviously much bigger than on the VHF data. So a lot of these early studies that estimated home ranges for a lot of species actually underestimate the home range size. And even with the GPSs, if we don't have perfect fixes, we might still underestimate. But if you can collect long enough data, a couple of months to, depending on the movement of the animal, we get fairly good approximation of a home range size. But with the modern method, we not only estimate the home range size as far as the outer limit, we can also look at the home range usage within the home range. So we can start identifying areas here in red where the animal spends a lot of time. On the left, it's a kernel estimation. We can see which areas these are, and we can relate that back to habitat. So if we have here, we have a river, the animal might spend a lot more time close to the river than far away, or other habitat variables we want to include. On the right, again, is a similar estimate, but it's another way. It's a method again that actually takes the movement of the animal into account when modeling these distributions. So we're not only taking the point, we're actually trying to interpolate between the points and get a better idea of like where the animal spends time moving around. So here's a movement trajectory, which gives us speed, daily movement, and we can also get behaviors. If especially for the large predator, if they spend some time in the same area, it's very likely that there was a kill. And ideally, we be able to go out into the field and verify that at least for a certain number of points. So we have actual field data that we can link back to the GPS data, but unfortunately, that's not always possible. We can also look at landscape connectivity. Here's an example from bighorn sheep in northern Mexico, right at the border between the United States and Mexico. Here's the actual border. Right now, in this part, there's still no border fence. And we see the animals moving across the border here. And we can actually identify where the main movement corridors are. Well, if you look closer at these trajectories, we can see here's a major highway. There's 2 lanes. And we can see that the animals basically walk up to the road, stay by the road, but never ever cross the road. So we can, using this data, we can actually identify that this highway very likely poses a very serious barrier for the species. And there's hardly any contact between population on the south of the highway and on the north of the highway. So again, having this detailed information can really tell us a lot about how these animals move. Translocations, we've already seen a lot of information on translocations on tigers that have been fitted with GPS collars in Sumatra. Here's an example from a jaguar in Peru. That animal was hanging out by a tourist lodge here, was moved about 300 kilometers up here into an area that is fairly good habitat. It's a logging concession, but very good habitat. We did a lot of studies there, good jaguar population. But we can see the animal didn't really settle in. It moved here, over here, where there's one of the major highways and a little village. And we kept tracking the animal and it started circling around this area. If we zoom in, we can see here's a village in the center. There's the highway, and then there's some cattle pastures. And the animal actually spent time very close to some of the villages, very close to some of the houses and in those open areas. And after about 3 weeks, the GPS locations stopped moving, and once the wildlife authorities went out, they found the animal was actually shot. So this was an example of an unsuccessful translocation, but it's really important to follow. If we do translocation, it's really important to follow these animals and see what happens with the animals. Is it successful, or are we just dumping an animal in a forest where it actually dies, either through human impact or because it's killed by another resident animal that's already there. The next couple of slides show really some of the cutting edge work, and a lot of credit goes to one of our postdocs, Anthony Pagano, who has been doing a lot of this work with polar bears. And it shows the combination with some of these new sensors where we combine accelerometers with camera collars and GPS collars, and some of the really interesting work that can be done with that. So if you think an accelerometer is something very novel or something that actually a lot of you are familiar with accelerometers. A lot of the phones have accelerometers in there that can tell you when you turn your phone and your screen flips, that's exactly that. It's an accelerometer in there. If you have a Fitbit or any of these fitness trackers that tell you how many steps you've taken, that's an accelerometer. That's exactly the same sensor we're using on the collars. And this graph here shows you like how some of these movement measures directly correlate with oxygen consumption and therefore energy expenditure. So based on the movement data from this device, we can actually measure how much energy the animal spends at a given time. So again, this goes back to your fitness tracker, but all of this needs to be calibrated. So we need to measure somebody who's running and how much energy they're actually burning using oxygen consumption. And then we can use models to really look at different behaviors based on these different data from the sensor. The sensor generally has 3 different axes, the movement is different depending on the behavior. So we can separate when the animal is swimming, when it's resting, when it's walking, or when it's pouncing on a prey or so on, depending on the species, right? But to take that one step further on the polar bear, what they did working with zoos again, they actually put a polar bear on a treadmill, had it walk, measured the data from the accelerometer, and measured the oxygen consumption to see how much energy it was actually burning. And they were then able to link that back to animals in the wild that were fitted with camera collars and with accelerometers. If we can't do that in the zoo, the other option is we have the camera collar on there and we record these videos, and we can see what the animal is doing at a given time, and we can link that back to the accelerometer data. So here we see a polar bear walking, we might see a tiger feeding or a tiger resting, and we can use that data to calibrate that. We can then link that back to, again, the accelerometer can continuously record data, and we get the GPS location to actually locate that. We can link that back to the landscape, so we can see, is a tiger in a human managed landscape, a human impacted landscape using a lot more energy than a tiger in a pristine landscape? Is a tiger at higher elevations using more energy, which means it requires a larger prey base? There's a lot of questions that can be answered with this. Or we can look at feeding behavior. We can see what the animal is eating. Again, it's great if we can observe animals in the wild, but often that's not possible. So this will give us some information also on prey selection and prey consumption. So while we're showing all that, San Diego Zoo is currently sponsoring 3 GPS collars with cameras that we're donating to Indonesia to be tested. And like we do with most of these collars, if possible, we do some tests at zoo animals. That's the advantage of working with the zoo. We have access to animals. And here we see a camera collar. And actually, this shows why these tests are important. As you can see, it's really not much we can see on that camera. And after we did the test, we went back to the company and had them change the design so the camera points further down, so we don't just see the chin. We can actually see more. But it's a good way of testing some of these collars before we put them out in the field. Not just on a bench, but on an animal. So the goal with this is, again, to test 2 new models of camera collars. One is by low-tech, one is by Vectronic, see if they work. And again, the goal is, as previously has done, to use some of the human-tiger conflict animals that are being translocated to test some of the collars before we might move to trying to collar animals that are in the wild. It's a great opportunity, I think, still to test the collars, but also, again, track, find out what happens to these animals. Do they really settle down? There were some promising results from previous studies, but do these animals really settle down in a new environment, or do they actually head back to villages, or do they get killed by poachers? So the idea is to really use this opportunity to answer a couple of questions. We can also test some of the camera collars. We can test some of the accelerometers, start trying to build some models on that. And the idea is to build this capacity in Indonesia. So I probably, unfortunately, won't even be able to go there. And all the efforts are led by an Indonesian team. Biba is leading a lot of that. We have the capacity there. With the goal of maybe eventually collaring wild tigers. I don't know if that meant we're out of time, but this is pretty much what I had. And really looking forward to the discussion of this. Thank you.
Sorry, are you finished already?
Yes. I didn't track my times. I don't know if I'm early or late, or I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. As Dr. Dolly Priyatna said before, that we use GPS collar here mostly for the tiger-human conflict, and clearly there are many options for us to use the GPS collar data sets for other studies, including like behavior, energy expenditures, things like that. So it's pretty much very valuable for us in terms of using the GPS collar data. And thank you as well for donating 3 GPS collar for us here. We will coordinate with the Ministry of Forestry on the use of the GPS Scholar. So thank you again. And next we have Samia Carrillo. Samia, are you there already? Where is Samia? Is it
Yeah, she's here. I'm setting her up here on my computer.
Okay.
So give me just 1 second here.
Okay, Samia will share her vast experience on field studies on using GPS Explorer on Jaguar. Here we mostly use cage box trap for capturing the tigers, and as Carl said before, he and his team also tried to use box trap for Javan leopard, and clearly there were more failure than successes. So the idea of Samia's presentations is to enlighten us with something about the use of say like traps for jaguar in I think in Peru or something. Okay, Samia, please introduce yourself briefly before you start your work, especially because you are an independent researcher.
Yeah.
So your time, so your time is 20 minutes, and time is yours.
Okay. I'm going to be sharing some of the experiences in lessons that we learned in this project that has been studying jaguars and pumas since 2004. That was first part of a WWF project, and now is part of the San Diego Zoo. I directed this project for the first 6 years, and then when it became part of the San Diego Zoo, it's directed by Matt Stobler. And so yeah, that's one of the that's what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. Oh well, tonight here in California, this morning over there in Indonesia. And one of the main objectives of this project was the development of technology to track species with large home ranges in the Peruvian Amazon. So two of the main species, let me go to the next one, that we studied, this is our study area, is the southeast part of the Amazon in Peru, and an area that is called Madre de Dios, and includes many types of land management. And this is what it looks like. And here are the jaguars and the pumas that we were trying to study. So, so far, this was a very novel project because no jaguars or pumas had been radio collared in the Amazon, because working in the Amazon is very challenging. There is super high humidity. Then the radio collars didn't work well. It was also like the only collars that we had available were the VHF radio collars, and the signal had to bounce in the canopy, in the very thick canopy of the Amazon. So it was really hard, and it worked for smaller animals, but for animals with big home ranges, it was impossible. And then we had to do it by airplane, and it was very challenging and expensive. So we decided to go ahead and test GPS radio collars. So the very first thing we did is, oops, what did I do? What did I do?
Relax.
Can you see it, this one?
No, it's not changed yet.
So can you see it?
Yeah, we see the slide, the jaguar and pumas actually.
Yeah, but I am the next one. Give me 1 second. I'm not used to I'm a Mac user, and this is a. This is just 1 second.
Okay.
Voila. Okay, you can see it now? Can you see it now? Okay, so
Yes.
the very first thing we did is before heading to the Amazon, we tried the GPS colors that we wanted for the Jaguars and the Pumas. And we order them, and we're trying with some companies that wanted to test their radio colors, the GPS colors, and we tested them in animals from the zoo. We left them in them for 4 to 6 weeks just to see if they were okay with the weight, if it was okay on their skin, if there were any problems at all. So once we found out that they were working well, that they didn't mind the weight, that they didn't try to take them off, then we knew what sizes we needed also, and we ordered them. So we have been changing radio collars throughout the time because it has been, as I mentioned before, very challenging. We always had problems with humidity, water getting into the GPS and then it stops working. They dropping sooner than they were programmed, although, and the battery, the main problem was the humidity getting into the GPS unit and then not allowing it to work. Also, we cover them with silicone and epoxy and whatever we could find that was like a super strong sealant, and still water would come in or the temperature wouldn't make it work. I mean, wouldn't help for them to work. It was difficult. But then 6 years later, we were still trying. This radio collars that you see in the screen are called EOBs, and they also came with a drop off, and they kind of work because also we couldn't monitor the animal for long. So, but anyways, once we had the radio collars, we had the big challenge of trapping the jaguars and the pumas. So we considered 3 different methods. The first one was dogs, because dogs were used or have been used in areas like Paraguay, and they are widely used here in the United States to trap pumas. And we just considered it, but then it was very challenging also because no dog, you know, the Amazon, the trees are very high and there was no way we would lower a jaguar that was like higher up in that tree. And also it was very challenging for the dogs. The dogs are very delicate. It was also very expensive. And we decided that that works much better in other places, but it wasn't for us in the Amazon. So the next one that we considered were boxes. And actually we had a few boxes made, and they worked when we had the prey on it, but they didn't work with prey, with other kinds of bait on it. We baited them with pigs. See this, in this slide, this was a peccary that the jaguar killed, and then we put it inside of the box, and then we got a jaguar. But that was just exceptional, and we got 3 jaguars in 2 years. Also, because we were using dogs and we were having volunteers, the volunteers didn't like the idea of having a dog used as bait because they saw it as cruel. And then we started using pigs. Also, the dogs wouldn't make any noise, so the dogs were sent to some ranches to live happily ever after. And then we used pigs, and the pigs were so hard to keep because we didn't want to bring diseases to the wildlife. The pigs had to be dewormed, vaccinated, like basically cleaned and be the happiest pigs in the world. And even then it didn't work. So we decided to not consider the boxes anymore. Also, we had boxes in very low areas. And there was one time where the river grew like crazy. It was raining for a whole week, and 6 of our traps, our boxes were closed, but they were buried too in the sand. So yeah, we decided not to go that route anymore. And so leg hole snares, we consider the leg hole snares as well. And I have to confess that I was biased towards snares because when I was hired for this project, I was coming from another project studying jaguars in Mexico, in northern Mexico. And we use jaguars and pumas, and we were using snares to this research snares for trapping the jaguars and the pumas. So I knew it was, I was very familiar with them, and it was very, to me, it was safer and easier to manage than boxes. So I needed to convince my boss because he wasn't very convinced, because he was, he saw the snares as like the snares that you guys see in Indonesia and Malaysia that, you know, killed everything and trap everything. So I want to make it very clear, this is not the snares we are talking about. These are snares that have been modified for research, and they are, we have added like safety issues, so they don't kill other animals. So when telling to my boss about the snares, we saw that they have been used to trap like endangered species, very endangered species, like Amur leopards right here, or snow leopards. So he said that we should try them, and then we started trying them. So what is a leg hole snare for research? One of the main things when you're trapping an animal is that you want to trap an animal and you want to release an animal that is healthy and is not injured, and it's just as good or better than when you caught it, because otherwise you're not gonna get accurate data. You're gonna get data on a sick animal or on an injured animal or an animal that is gonna die soon. So you don't want that. So that's why you want to be super safe when you are trapping any cat, and mostly, if it's an endangered species, any animal, anyways. So this first picture is what we find in the store, what we buy. This is a snare for bears, and then in the next picture is the way it looks after it has been modified. So what we do is we add a swivel here that doesn't allow the cable to get tangled. Then we add a shock absorber, so the animal, when gets trapped and starts pulling, doesn't get hurt, doesn't pull the muscles on the paw. And we also add a stopper, what we call a stopper, which is just wrapping tape around the loop, the cable and the loop, so it doesn't hurt the skin as much. And also, like in case it gets triggered by a smaller species, when the loop closes, it stops where the tape starts, and then a smaller paw won't get, or a smaller foot won't get trapped. You know, we get many animals in the Amazon that can walk over the trap and then trigger it, but they won't get caught because the loop just won't trap them. So let me see where I am here. So again, the main modifications that we do is we add the spring as a shock absorber, we add the swivel to avoid tangling, we add a lock to avoid accidents also for the person. I didn't show it in the other picture because it's mainly in the spring that you see, the metal spring that you see in the picture here below, right here. It has a lock in here that is closed until you're ready to deploy it. so it doesn't open. There have been reported some accidents on people that they open, you know, the spring doesn't have the lock, and then it opens and then it hits the head or the jaw of the person that is setting the snare with really bad results. So another thing that we noticed is that, well, that we added after the first capture of a tapir is that we needed to add something for bigger prey walking there. So these stakes that you see here are to avoid tapirs, and they work really well. The tapirs saw them on the trail and they just went around. So they never got caught, and we didn't have to deal with that. Another thing that we do is that we know that cats are very sensitive to temperature. So they get hot really fast and they can die from it. So we try to set our traps in shady spots always, and far away from anything that can hurt them. It could be a tree, it could be, you know, sticks, something that is sharp. We just don't do it. So we're very, very picky with the places where we set our snares. So how does it work? It's very, very simple. When the step is triggered, then the spring that is holding the step here opens up, and when it opens, it pulls the cable that we call the loop, and then that cable traps the animal. So it's a very simple way. And here is what it looks like. So in the first picture, you see how it's tied to a tree. And then later on, we learned that we didn't want them really tied to trees. We wanted them better tied to roots, because it was stronger. Tying the cable to a root was stronger, and we could do it far away from trees, so the animals wouldn't get tangled on trees or wouldn't pull the trees. See, when jaguars are extremely strong, and so when they get caught, they try to catch whatever they have around them. So when you see a place that after you catch a jaguar, it's all destroyed. It's like if there was a bomb in there, you know? So we wanted to avoid any injuries, and at the beginning we cut all those little trees that were around, but that wasn't very nice. So we started tying them to roots in places that were far away from trees, and that worked really, really well. So on the third picture, you see how the spring is set. You can actually see the lock in there, right here, you know, and this is the pad where the animal is going to step on. And this is where the cable is gonna go, you know, the loop is gonna go around this. And so the next step is this. When you disguise it on the ground, you cover it with dirt. And then you can either like mark it with sticks or with leaves or with something. We normally clean the ground because we have seen that animals like to walk on clean places. They prefer, at least in our part of the Amazon, that all the animals prefer to walk on trails rather than, or not the animals, but the animals that we went to study, the jaguars or the cougars, they like to walk on trails. So this is what it looks like. You know, you see the trail, and here's the snare. And if you see it closer, you know, it's disguised with a few sticks in here and in a very clean spot, so the animal wants to step on it. And in the third picture, you can see there are no many trees around me, and that is I'm tying the snare, the cable to a root, just what I was explaining before. So one of the things, we started trapping with the snares only, and we caught 4 jaguars in 2 months. So it was working better than the boxes, but it was still wasn't working for our timing. See, like for us, it was lots of money every day paid to salaries, to people moving, to checking traps, and we needed to make it more efficient. So what we did is we included the use of colors, and the use of colors increased our success enormously. We caught 12 jaguars in 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, I'm sorry. So you can see what a color is just a recording of a call. It could be a prey, like praying in distress, or a mating call from the animal of the same species. And it works very well to attract the cats to the area. So one of the things that we did is we check the traps as often as we can, like 3 times a day at least. Whenever it was rainy, it was hot, or even if we had a cold front, then we closed them. And one of the things that I would recommend is to use trap transmitters, which is just like a GPS, a little VHF that goes in the trap. And when it's triggered, it starts sending a signal. And then it lets you know, to your phone, to your satellite, actually, yes, it is GPS, to your phone, to your computer, that the trap has been triggered and you probably have something there. So once we have a jaguar trapped, we try to move as fast as we can. We have been very lucky to have the same team for the last 14 years. And so everybody knows what to do. In our truck, we carry everything we can possibly need, from tools to medicine to I forgot, dart guns. And that is another thing that we changed. We started darting the cats with pistols, like dart pistols, but they were really loud and they would scare and stress the cats. So now we do it with blowguns, and it works very well. They don't even feel it coming, and they are way less stressed by the time they fall asleep, and we can work much better on them. So this is what it looks like. There is the blowgun here, and the vet injects the animal, and we just wait for it to fall asleep. Then somebody starts taking the animal off the snare. Then once it's off, we wait it, and then quickly somebody starts fitting it with the radio collar. The vet is monitoring the animal all the time for we have a pulse oximeter. You will see it on the next screen here. So we're always monitoring them, taking measurements and pictures, and everything we can. So here are the GPS collars that we fitted them with. Let me see. They were set to drop after 12 months, but many of them didn't fall after 12 months. Some did, some didn't, because what I was saying, the humidity is a big challenge. Then the radio collar had to be retrieved. So we had to fly over the area and then get the location from the VHF included in the GPS collar, and then give that location to our team, and they will go into the jungle and retrieve it from wherever it was. So these are some of the things. We treat minor injuries. The snares can cause minor injuries, as you can see. They take even though the cable is wrapped in tape, sometimes they pull too much and then the skin comes off. Sometimes also the hand gets really swollen, that goes down. And we also take care of the parasites they come with, and then we heal smaller injuries. We take all the samples we can, blood, hair, ectoparasites, tissue, and then we inject them with a I forgot the name, for the drug, the drug that wakes them up, and they go their way. Use all those purple stains that you see, those were parasites that were inside of the cat that we took off, and then we put some medicine in there to prevent infection. So this is the one of the radio collar, the GPS data we got from one of the female jaguars. This one was particularly attached to the river. And all this, since 2006, we have caught 23 male jaguars and 9 female jaguars. And we have caught 11 pumas and 2 females. We have been able to retrieve data from 20 GPS radio collars that we put on all these cats. And one of the main things we learned, well, is like you need to do a lot of research and a lot of trials, and then you decide what works better for your study site and for the species you want to work with. We are super lucky. We consider ourselves super lucky because we got an awesome team of people that has been working with us all this time, and they are very professional. They are always engaged. They love what they do. They are always on time. They don't complain about the rain, about the work. Sometimes we had to stay like on Christmas, or we had to stay, longer time, and everybody was away from their family, but nobody complained. Everybody loved the work, and everybody just kept doing it. And one of the other things that we always recommend is to have a veterinarian, because, for example, I am trained from a generation of people that didn't want to use vets. It was just, they thought that they could do everything, catch the cat, treat the cat. But now that we caught so many cats, I have seen that there are many instances where it's really, really good to have a veterinarian that is ready to tackle, temperature problems. If the cat, you never know what kind of cat you are going to trap. So that is super recommendable. It's always good to make sure that you have a budget that contemplates, a good number of radio collars and all the time that you're going to spend trapping. And also, like, for example, we had to pay for the flight to get the location of the GPS collars that we needed to retrieve. So, for example, that, you need to think of. And we learned the hard way in some cases that we needed to have a plan B or plan for the worst, like you're driving, checking your traps, and then the truck breaks or gets stuck in the mud and it's impossible to get it out, or you got to deploy everybody to close the traps because a storm is coming, and you have to be ready for all that. And one of the most important things that I already said is, in order to avoid injuries and stress, you want to check your traps as often as you can. Like, you can check them every hour if you can, or if you cannot because they are far away, then add a transmitter to them. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Samia. There are a lot of things that we get from your presentation, especially the using of lag trap for capturing the animals. It certainly give us valuable information, especially the use of, as an alternative of the use of the box trap that we used so far. So let's go to question and answer here. Let's see. We have not many questions. First one is for Matthias. From anonymous attendees, the question is, can you explain and tell me how if GPS collar drop off before the time that we expected, what we can do and how to prevent this?
Can you repeat it? If the drop-off drops off before the time?
Yeah.
We never really had that issue. I mean, I think if that's really that, there's not much you can do for that. If there's a problem with the device, then the best thing is talk to the manufacturer and discuss it with them and hope they can fix it or switch the brand you're going to be using, right? And it's always possible that things like that happen. And that the ones we've used, we really never really had that issue. They were fairly reliable. Where we had problems where we had collars that the old early days, people used collars that had a little cloth piece that was supposed to wear out and the collar came off and so on. But the mechanical ones, either they work or they don't work. And if you really have problems with your drop-offs, then you probably first want to discuss it with the manufacturer or else change your brand.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next question from. Okay, I think this one is for Samia. So the question is how to ensure that the animal that would be trapped is only jaguar. Is there any possibility that other animal trapped accidentally? So that's the question.
There is always a chance that we will catch something else, but as I was explaining, that's why we make the loop to close at a certain size, so smaller animals don't get trapped. And we also put the stake on top, for example, for tapirs, because that was the biggest fear, to trap a tapir, and it worked very well. So we do whatever we can to avoid bycatch.
Okay, that's clear. Let's move to other question. This one is for Teddy Wahyudi, for all the speakers. Let's give it to Carl first. The question is, when put on a GPS collar on animals, does it not make them sick and increase stress when put on for a long time? How to minimize the bad impact on animal? Is Carl still here? Carl? Okay, maybe Matthias can answer it.
Yeah, there's fairly strict guidelines on how GPS collar, how heavy a GPS collar can be, how it should be configured. So there's a rule of thumb, no more than 5% of body weight, which is, I think, is great for smaller animals. For larger animals, we're often much below that. And one of the reasons we do these tests on zoo animals, if possible, is really to see how the collars fit, how they impact them. But by now, VHF and GPS collars have been used on thousands of animals, and generally, studies haven't found any negative effect. Again, assuming that you do it properly, that you pick the right size collar and the correct method of attachment. So a lot of it comes down to really knowing your study species, doing research on what collar to use, and being well trained, and the people who deploy the collars being well trained on putting the collar on, so it's not too tight or too loose. But again, it's a technology that's been used on thousands of animals around the globe. So generally speaking, it's very safe. Another danger, I just want to point that out real quick. A lot of danger is that people put a GPS collar, and we had that happen on our side. We put a GPS collar on an animal and the animal dies because of another cause. Either it gets shot by somebody, or the animal dies of a natural cause, or it gets killed by another jaguar, and then sometimes there's a tendency of, say, blaming the collar on it, and oftentimes, or the capture, and oftentimes that's just not the case. Animals die. So you have to be careful also to come to conclusions that every animal that dies with a collar on it, that there's something wrong with the collar. The animals die because of a lot of other causes.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Is Carl still here? There is one question for Carl, actually, coming. Pak Carl.
But Bip, I think Carl already left the meeting because he has another meeting.
He apologized.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Let's skip the questions we can send the question to him. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have for the questions for all the speakers. Thank you so much for your time joining us. For Matthias and Shami, I know it's entering your kids' time. But yes, thank you so much for your time and your inputs. Certainly, as I said before, that we are going to develop our national protocol on GPS for applications. So there is also possibility for us to contact you again to get some inputs, especially for the protocol. And let me give only one concluding remark. So clearly that from all the presentation, including the first session, that the GPS Scholar is not like buying a necklace and fit in to the animal right away. So there is a lot of things that we have to consider and learn from other experts. So I hope that this will open our mind that we need to be really careful in treating the animal in terms of fitting the GPS Scholar. So thanks again for all the participants and the speakers. I give time back to Dinda.
Thank you, Pak Biba, that led for this session. And now for wrap up and give summary of all the discussion, there are Mr. Idin Ahmad here. He is the field candidate from World Crew, Department of Zoology, Oxford University. Hello, Kang Idin. Are you with me now?
Hello. Yes, I've been here sitting all day long, listening to very interesting talk from very distinguished people that have their own, they have excellent expertise in this field. So what should I do next?
Give us a wrap up and summary of all the discussion. You are ready?
Should I show my slide or just write, because I'm writing in my notebook, so I don't type it. I didn't type it.
So,
is that okay?
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah? Okay. So first of all, I would like to say thank you very much for very interesting talks from the distinguished keynote speakers from, I could say, across the globe, because we have a national speakers, Pak Wiratno, the DG of KSDAE, and Professor Gono Smiri of the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Dr. Dolly Priyatna from Forum Harimau Kita, and 3 international speakers, Dr. Carl Tryholt from Copenhagen Zoo, and also Dr. Matthias Tobler. We've met once, right, at World Crew 2 years ago or last year, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, we've met. And Miss Samia Carrillo, and thank you very much. So to wrap this up, I think it is more appropriate if I say this is just like I draw some interesting points from these great speakers. So some intriguing, not question, but statement from Mr. Wiratno, I would like to highlight here that in Indonesia, we actually don't have any regulation, special regulation on animal tracking. So I can say this is non-existent. So we have a room to improve through maybe issuing a ministry or DG of KSDAE regulation. And from the government perspective point of view, I would say that this technology, the GPS Scholar technology, is important tools, method in supporting government program in mapping the habitats and but also mitigate the conflict mitigation. Yeah, mitigate the conflict, human-related conflict. I mean, So if we see this, there is a new technology and there's a new opportunity to implement this, the Director General invite us. I think he was saying that he invite us to come forward with the, not proposal, but actually like a discussion, further discussion about the financial consequences. So if we want to implement this technology, we want to build this more in science-based water conservation, how much money do we need to implement this? Okay, so this is a good statement from the DG. The financial consequences, because we are, I mean, not where the government is looking for the next 2-3 years for future a budget allocation for this particular research. And the second from Professor Gono Sumiri of Indonesian Institute of Sciences, he explained that since last year, we fortunately we have a new law that called Sinas Iptek 2019. So this law highlights the importance of making a policy based on a robust, truthful science. So he explained that the law number 1 in 2019, the Article 21 mentioned that the results and the synthesis from the research, okay, should be supporting the development through publishing and disseminating it. So we have an encouraging what I could say a regulation from the government, made by our government, that in the next era, in the future, in the near future, we need to, the development, whether infrastructure development, anything that related to our human well-being or economic development, should consider science as a foundation. And Professor Gono also mentioned that regarding biodiversity data, we have a term that called Wali data. Instead of repository, he mentioned about depository. And this is being discussed by the authorized institutions, how this is going to be working in the next 2-3 years, because the law itself is expected to be in place by August next year, right? And I would like to wrap Professor Gono up about this, his explanation that in this study, over the past, the existing, or the future study, we need to have a clear and clean statement from the authorized institution regarding the ethic, the finances, the welfare, and how the data specimen will be transferred or moved within the countries, or within the country, or beyond the country. So this would be very, very clear. I move to the next speaker, Dr. Priyatna. So he's basically explaining us about his vast experience working in GPS Scholar application. So he said that GPS Scholar is the main tools in animal tracking, because this is the one and only that we can see the animal move, like in more sense of like a animal moving from one area to one spot, one point to another, right? And he also mentioned about the historical mark of VHF Scholar back in 2003, when he and his team from ZSA Indonesia successfully tracked the tiger. It was using the box trap immobilizer, right? And then through this stepping, I could select the marking year or marking period that the next capturing tigers from Aceh to Lampung was then built up. So in 2011, up to 2011, there are at least 6 tiger individuals have been collared with 2 types of GPS collar. So the collar lasts from 7 days, I think, in Kerinci, which was quite unfortunate. I was part of the team that we set the collar, and it died after 7 days. We released it. So yeah, highlighting the lesson learned that Dr. Priyatna presented us a few hours ago, I said that. He mentioned that a tiger could transport from the release site to their original site beyond, like, more than 70 kilometers away, which mean that we need to think carefully when or where not exact, but the potential location where we want to put back our collared animals. And I think that's from Dr. Dolly Priyatna. And now I'm moving on to Dr. Carl Treuhold. So Dr. Treuhold explaining the brands, actually, at least 6 brands that globally available for us to utilize, and how these brands are fit into the existing application, either in mobile or on PC. So we are very much fortunate that at least globally we have 6 options to choose, that if we want to implement a GPS collar study. And I want to mark Dr. Treuhold's slides on the MoveBank. So I think this is an intriguing statement information from Dr. Treuhold that is quite contradictory with the current Indonesian government policy, where all data should not be based on cloud. In other sense is the data should be based in Indonesia, as been stated by Pak Chris Mangko, that saying that all servers of these companies or potential company who want to be, or their services is going to be used by the researchers here, should be based in Indonesia. So this is quite important question, how to overcome this, because you know how many years you need to build a new servers in Indonesia, say Google. Okay. This is for us to discuss in further discussion. And now I'm moving to Dr. Matthias Tobler, that explain his slides explains the advances of GPS collar technology. And I'm amazed with this information that this animal tracking, the history of animal tracking, is backdated to 1800. So this is quite long history in animal tracking, and with the new technologies provide us with a good and more reliable data acquisition. So now we should just like sitting in our desk and receiving emails from the providers, right? And I would like to paraphrase Dr. Tobler sentence that with the new technology, we can combine the GPS advantages with the more details accelerometer. This is very interesting. And how this collaboration between ecologists and the engineer. So I remember that one of my colleagues back in the Wild Crew, Matt Wires, he worked in Zimbabwe, and his project is a very multidisciplinary. So he's got support from the Department of Engineering, Department of Computer Science, and Department of Zoology. So this kind of collaboration, I think it was also mentioned by one of our participants, that how could we improve this collaboration in the future. So I think I left this I will leave this for our future discussion. And the last but not least, Miss Samia A. Sorry, I'm sorry if I mistakenly pronounce your name. So she briefly explained, like telling her story on how the challenging was her work capturing jaguars and puma in Peruvian Amazon. Yeah, Peruvian Amazon, I think. Yes, is that correct, right? And I think the challenge is humidity. I remember, so I'm trying to interlink with my experience as well back in 2016 when we first collared the cloud leopard in Jambi. So the humidity is the main challenge for us to tackle. And second to that, our team was very innovative in terms of dealing with that, to overcome the challenge. So I remember the Dr. Treholt and Dr. Tobler saying that this could be our team could be consists of various background, and for sure, Samia also mentioned about the various background, various skills that made the team very, very solid. So I would like to enact that innovation and a good collaboration, and also good initiative by the authorized body, I think is the three important keys if we want to bring these ideas, bring this discussion into a further action in Sumatra. So the lesson learned that I want to bring to this table to the attendance here and to this distinguished key speakers. I think this is now our opportunity to bring this technology to Indonesia as one advantages with this is now more available, more affordable to us, and especially with the generous support from international donors, and like Dr. Tobler says, from the San Diego Zoo, there's quite a good opportunity for us to expand this, to reopen the opportunity to do the research on tiger movement. So I think that's the several key points that I capture from this discussion. I hope this helps us to remembering this discussion, and hopefully we'll have more further discussion in these topics. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Kang Edim, for all key points from this discussion. And now we need to make some announcement. Don't forget to fill attendance form. So we will send the e-certificate to you automatically. You can see the link at chat box. And the link is only available for 30 minutes after we share it. Then I think we only have 10 minutes left for that link. So don't forget and make sure you write or type your email address with it correctly. And for future information, you can reach us by email, forum@harimau-kita.or.id, or contact us through WhatsApp. So as we bring our GPS Scholar application issues to a close, we once again thank you for allowing us to be here in this webinar, and hope that this webinar has given you a much clearer understanding and enlightening about GPS Scholar in wildlife conservation management. We hope to see you again next time. Don't forget to wear mask, keep physical distancing, and wash your hands. Stay safe, stay healthy wherever you are. Goodbye.